Sorry for the delay. First item for the work session tonight is a presentation by Joe Brown with Buxton. Buxton is a company, it's a nationwide company that helps cities in their economic development pursuit to improve their town, get new businesses in. And I'm going to let Joe give a background on his company and what they can provide to the township area. But they have a number of cities in Colorado that they work with and worked with in the past, and they provide data and information that cities can use to help recruit and pursue businesses to get them into the town that would make the best fit and would be the most successful. So
Okay.
Let Joe give his presentation and answer any questions from the board. And
Welcome. Thanks for coming.
Perfect. Thank you guys for having me. I appreciate it. Alrighty. No, presentation will take maybe 10-15 minutes max.
Do me a quick favor just for the...
Sure.
It's not really on tape, but name and business address, if you wouldn't mind.
Joe Brown with Buxton from Fort Worth, Texas.
Great, thanks.
And just for clarity, do I need to talk into this? Is there being recorded and all that? Or, cause I like to move around. I'm an excitable guy, so...
We can give you a pointer if needed. But
Okay, yeah, all right. Sounds good.
You can't move around.
Perfect. I got 10-15 minutes for you guys. Just a little bit of background on who we are, what we do, some of the other communities we've helped out with, and then particularly how it relates back to Superior and how you guys will be able to utilize some of the services and products that we provide. If you got questions along the way, stop me. This is meant to be very informal, educational process, the whole 9 yards, and I've got plenty of time at the end to answer any questions that you guys have. So. To give you an idea, Bucks has been around for 17 years. Started out in the private sector. We've also expanded into the public sector and healthcare. Private sector-wise, we've got clients like FedEx, KSL Partners out of Denver, Smashburger, Lowe's, Natural Grocers. We've got about 1,700 different private sector clients that we mainly help with retail site selection for them. So understanding when they go into site, where their customers are, who their customers are, and what those customers mean financially to their business over the course of the year. Now we do two different types of things with the private side. We help them with retail site selection on new sites, but also in years past we've also helped them when they're downsizing. What sites should they be closing essentially? So both of those utilizing the same information on who their customers are, where they are, and what those mean to their business. Public sector wise, just kind of we work in 48 states. We've got over 550 municipalities that we work with. Here in Colorado in the past 12 months, we've worked with Grand Junction, Brighton, Sterling or Logan County Economic Development, and the city and county of Broomfield. So actually Fort Lupton as well. So some of the communities right around you guys here in the North Denver metro area have been utilizing our services, actually with great success. So, and finally, healthcare-wise, with the healthcare side, we use the same type as the retail and the public sectors, is understanding who their healthcare patients are as customers, essentially, and what their needs are, how to better serve those populations, and what financially they mean to a hospital facility or outpatient ambulatory care facility. We work in economic development, we work in city services, planning insights, visitors, tourism, and healthcare. And I'll walk through essentially everything that we do in those ends, but we're going to focus on mainly today with economic development, so the business recruitment and business retention. It's done through our Scout program, and our Scout program is basically the online delivery tool. It's a good analogy is it's kind of the HD TV that we deliver everything through. So it's very easy to use. We're not sending you 15 3-ring binders full of information. It's got about 75 to 80% of the information that all our analysts use on a daily basis, included in this Scout program. It's meant for CEOs of companies, city managers, economic development folks, people that don't necessarily have a GIS or econometrics background to help them use our tools. And essentially what it does for communities of your size, of about 12,000 folks who may not necessarily have an entire department dedicated to economic development, it improves efficiency and effectiveness of those people that you got in place. So it's going to help them streamline, be a force multiplier for those people who may wear a couple different hats, so they can pull reports on the fly, they can help out developers, they can help out landowners, whatever it might be. It's real easy to use. Buxton website, Scout program. Every city has their unique username and password. It's Google Maps interface, so something you guys see on a daily basis. Everything you can zoom in, zoom out. You can print these high-quality maps. You can include them on tear sheets that you're giving out at ICSC conferences or CM or whatever it might be. Everything that we do is a right-click functionality. So you right-click on it, you have a series of different options. You have business recruitment, business retention, custom programs, and healthcare insights. I'm going to really focus on the first two here, which is the business recruitment and business retention end of everything. The first of which is a custom variable reporting. Custom variable reporting is basically, it encompasses the majority of our data sources. It's going to give you everything you need as far as demographic reports, so age, sex, race, income, education levels, current demographic reports, 2015 projections, 2000 actuals, 1990 actuals, percent change over time. You'll be able to see all this with this demographic report. You can compare yourself to other cities, other counties. Whatever you wanted to do, you can manipulate this information. It's literally got hundreds of thousands of different variables you can pull up. You can pull up variables such as electricity, fuel and gas, natural gas, total crime rates, percentage of civilians employed, unemployed. Basically, most of what you need, we work with cities, I've worked with cities to help bring prisons to their community, and we've used some of this information. I've worked with cities that, on fire departments, they need to streamline their fire departments and who's going to be utilizing this, their services, EMS programs. You can do all that through this Scout program right here, this custom variable reporting. And again, you can compare it to different geographies as well. So it's going to come up very easy report, Excel spreadsheet, PDF. You can import it, export it. You can give it to as many people as you want. You can take the Buxton name off of it totally and hand it out to whoever needs it. We just ask that you don't make a profit on it, on that. So, but very easy to use. Pull up all these reports. It can help out in a variety of different ways, not just with economic development, but everything you guys do within the city. We also are able to profile households and residential populations, residential and workforce populations, I'm sorry. And the way we do this, we use mosaic profiles. It's called psychographic segmentation. Just at a 30,000-foot view, here's what it looks like. We've got 250 different data sources that we use. It gives us information on 112 million different households and up to 7 individuals in the household. So you think every time you use a debit card, credit card, a frequent buyer card, you change your channel on your digital cable or satellite radio, someone's tracking all that information. It's kind of crazy and Big Brother-ish, but someone is tracking all of that. And so what Buxton does, our business, is acquiring the best of that information and helping to help you understand who your community is, who your citizens are, what businesses, both for a manufacturing type businesses, primary employers, but also your retailers and restaurant concepts would be the best fit for your community. We use psychographic segmentation because if you look at 112 million different households individually, it's just too much to quantify, to comprehend. We break it down from 112 million down into 60 different segments. And those 60 different segments are psychographic segmentations, mosaic. There's about 3 or 4 different types of psychographic segmentations out there, but it's pretty universally known as far as your regional and national retailers are concerned. It's how they're making a lot of their decisions. Does that make sense to everybody?
No. So psychographic, you're saying that's the kind of the psychology of a person in a house.
So basically, the best way I can put it is, with demographics, you look at 2 households that are right next to each other. Both 45 years old, college educated, make about $100,000 a year, have 2 kids, similar type jobs. Demographically, they look exactly the same. But one of them drives an F-150, drinks Bud Light, and buys hunting gear from Cabela's every week. The other one, drives a BMW, drinks fine wine, goes to the opera in downtown Denver. So 2 very, very different consumers, same demographically. What psychographic segmentation does is tell you who the consumer is, which is why your regional and national retailers, they use that type of segmentation to understand their customers, because they can really fine-tune who exactly they're targeting as opposed to just an age group or an income range. Does that make sense?
So it actually runs a query for you in
Yeah.
your vicinity.
So what it'll do, so what we have the ability to do is look at a 1-mile radius, and this is a 1-mile radius in Fort Worth, Texas. And it's going to break it down so your 60 different segments are on the bottom right there. And it runs kind of in line with socioeconomic status, so amount of money people make from left to right. And so your wealthiest people are going to left, and on over to your right to the most challenged folks. Then it also breaks down the number of households that are encompass that type of segmentation. And so what we're able to do, and I'll get to this with the retail matching, is we're able to then compare what the actual customer profile is. So understand what you're spending your money on, what you're spending your free time doing, so that you can make a better and more informed decision on which retailers to recruit or what types of businesses, entrepreneurial-wise, would be a good fit here. Does that make sense? You look a little confused.
Well,
so.
because I'm thinking you can find everything you want about me, and does that mean that you are able to know where I'm shopping at?
Essentially,
Specifically, I mean, I'm shopping in Broomfield and not here.
No,
Is it
not.
right there and
We
it's
don't. We
right
don't.
here?
We don't get that specific. We don't get that
Okay.
specific. It's more with 60 different segments. There is a area of generalization that goes into it. We could figure out that information, but we generalize it so that we can actually look at it and quantify it and compare it to different areas, if that makes sense. So that's why if you look at it specifically for every single household, then it's just too much information. And so we break it down and generalize it to a certain degree, but it still is going to tell you the type of household that you are.
In other words, you need to start shopping with cash.
If you still have questions,
And
when
not
I
on the internet.
get, when I get through with everything, please ask them. Consumer propensity reports are a really neat tool that, and these next two items are great business retention tools. So businesses, small businesses, you already have. Consumer propensity reports something we developed for folks like Walmart, Kroger, Lowe's, our national clients that have stores in different parts of the country. Essentially what it does is tell you the propensity of people to purchase certain items in a given trade area. So you can look at a 1 mile radius of Fort Worth, Texas again, and it's going to have 32 categories and 4,800 different line items. With an index category of 100, or an index of 100, you can see those people in Fort Worth, Texas are 209% more likely than average Americans to use a Jane eyebrow pencil, or 205% more likely than average Americans to use Pampers First Step disposable diapers. And you can change this however you want. So the example I usually give when to some cities, and I think I've probably given it to Chris in the past and Sandy, is that we look at a small coffee shop downtown. We can see, we can look at snacks and beverages that people eat and desserts that they eat and see that people in this area are actually, if you're a coffee shop downtown, you're going to put water on your shelves. People in this area are more likely to drink Arrowhead water than Aquafina water, so may as well put the Arrowhead. Or people are going to eat Snickers bars as opposed to Twix bars, so if you're going to put a candy bar right by the cash register, make it a Snickers. So those types of things to help your small businesses basically compete, because your Walmarts, your Lowe's are all using products like this. They don't have access to it because they don't have the funds that those people have, and so the city can give back to them by providing them these tools. The other is a retail leakage and surplus report, and these are great for general, when you're looking generally at an area location. And so say you're looking at the marketplace area that you have down here, Superior Marketplace, and you understand that the retail leakage and surplus is the area, so that you're putting together a one-page tear sheet to take to ICSC, you can see what types of industries you should be targeting. Or if you're an entrepreneur, you want to see, is there an opportunity for a men's clothing store in the area? You can see, what's a retail
So
leakage
tell
and
us what
surplus?
leakages versus surplus.
So basically, it's got 35 product categories, 25 subcategories, 63. I mean, there's a lot of information, a lot of different categories, and what it looks at. So say you look at a 5-minute drive time from downtown Superior, from Superior Marketplace. It's going to look at all the households and all the businesses in that 5-minute drive time. It's going to look at what those businesses have reported as their revenue for the year. It's also going to look at what the communities, the households, spent their money on. So if those businesses are reporting more money than these households are spending, then you've got people coming from outside that 5-minute drive time to spend money, and vice versa. If they're not, if the consumers are spending more than those businesses are reporting, then you've got a leakage. People are going elsewhere to buy those certain goods. So great directional tool. Great to understand, so if you guys, these are the types of businesses we want to be targeting, it's a good way to start. The economic impact model, and I'll touch just briefly on this, but a lot of what you guys have, and I've looked through all the different sites that you have available, and there's 2 pad sites that I think are dedicated to office buildings and stuff that those types of uses right now, creating primary employer jobs, employment jobs. What this is going to be able to do is give you an idea. It's similar to the retail leakage and surplus report. It's going to give you an idea of what industries would be a best fit here. It's going to look at everything around here, understanding that you have, Lockheed and Key Equipment Finance and the ConocoPhillips training facility. It's going to look at all those different businesses that you have in this area and see what else would be a good fit based on those businesses. And the retail matching model is the heart and soul of what we do, and from talking to Chris and Sandy and Matt and Beth over the past couple months here, really I think you guys could see the best benefit from, and based on past experiences, most specifically working with Brighton, which I feel is relatively similar type community to what you guys have here and what they're trying to accomplish. But you guys have two big projects with the town center and with a lot of the Superior Marketplace and the vacancies that you have available over there. Understanding who would be a good fit, why they would be a good fit, and being able to help out those developers as they're identifying those tenants is really important. That's really what we can help out with. We can look at a given trade area, so right around the marketplace, and understand which would be a best fit. So that for this area, Santa Monica, California, we can tell you that a Brooks Brothers is a great fit for a clothing store. They've got 7 other locations in the Western Pacific that they usually look for about 27,482 customers, and this site has 29,268. They usually look for dominant segments, so people that are going to shop at their store, they look for 10,914. This site's got 12,127. You can kind of see at the bottom how that breaks up in the psychographic segmentation. And then we can go one step further, and those yellow dots, as you zoom in on those, are actually individual households that are Brooks Brothers customers. So that when you're painting that picture for them and helping them understand why they would be a good fit here and what the opportunity is, you can actually quantify it for them. So that's the heart and soul of what we do for retail recruitment. So like I said, the application to Superior, pretty simple. Town center project. I mean, the retail office and all that stuff you have right there. And the Superior Marketplace, I can see that jumps out for the retail matching end of everything. And a lot of the questions that we get are around, do developers currently have access to this tool? Is this really, the city's responsibility and those types of deals? And as I've talked to Chris and Sandy about it, is developers really, truly, they use the demographic information, but a lot of what they're doing right now is based on relationships. So they've got relationships. They've built a Target before. They've built, a sports authority before. And that's how they bring in their folks. What we're seeing more and more these days is a city playing a more active role in this whole process. So helping them with the additional information. And that's what we're doing with Brighton. I probably run 5 reports every 2 weeks for Brighton on retailers that are interested. And the reason I'm getting those requests is because they have developers within the city that come to them and say, hey, can you help us out with this, or can you help us out with that? It brings you more actively to the table. And developers really, truly aren't using a lot of this information. City's responsibility, I absolutely think it is the city's responsibility to play a part in this, because as you move through the process, developers come and go, as you're seeing in some of the sites that you have right now. The unifying force in this whole thing is how actively the city is playing a part in this. So it's really important now more than it's been the last 10, 15 years. We have a lot of support staff in place. It doesn't take very long. We get everything up and going in probably 30 to 60 business days. So we can help you along the way. Where we separate ourselves from any competition that we have out there is that we've got people dedicated to the service end of everything. As you have unique business questions that come up, we've got people that can put together reports or whatever you need to answer those questions. Price-wise, what we look at for the basic information is $15,000 per year, and that's what the annual subscription rate will be for the retail leakage and surplus, for the residential populations, etc. What I talked to Chris and Sandy about is for the entire project for year 1, it's a $50,000 project, so it's pretty expensive. To give you a reference point, we worked with Brighton and Fort Lupton for about $55,000, so it's relatively in line. The reason it's a little bit different is conversation I had with Chris ahead of time. That's kind of what we had talked about. So just to give you an idea, it's year 1. It helps us build all the models, gives you access to everything. Year 2, we refresh everything, and it's never more than $15,000. So There's the full scope of everything. Please ask me some questions.
Great, thanks so much. I guess my first question, don't you work for the NSA as far as I can tell?
Questions from the board?
So I'll start off. Could you describe how you see our geographic area? Are we just Superior or who are we?
So that's a really important thing, is that if you just look at your 12,000 or so population, you're really selling yourself short. You've got with Broomfield and Louisville and Lafayette and Boulder and everything you guys have surrounding you right now, there's a tremendous opportunity. You have a lot more customers in this area than you do have citizens in the Superior, city limits, town limits. So it's really important, as you're looking for the regional and national folks to fill some of those vacancies you have in the marketplace, is to understand that they're not looking at their town of Superior and your demographics. They're looking at a drive time. They're looking at all the customers. They could care less if they're on Broomfield's city limits or unless the city council's tough on them. But they could care less where they're at as long as they're reaching their customers. So it's all about helping them understand their customers. And the one thing I didn't mention in there is the other big question we're getting right now: are retailers actually looking to expand? That's with the marketplace what it is. And what I'll tell you is they are. They haven't been the last couple of years. They've been holding their money, kind of seeing what happens. But the bottom line is that if you're, Burger Kings of the world or, Walmarts of the world, those types of folks, if they really want to increase their bottom line, they've got to add additional stores. And so they've been saving their money. They've been not making any moves. But what they're doing right now is they're planning for, 2012, 2013 on projects that they need to be a part of and areas that they need to be a part of. So, yes, you're very much in the midst of, we need to get started again, and we're going to see who's on that list to add new stores for. So,
Okay. Other questions?
Do you have examples of public-private partnerships with this? I would think that, Blackstone's a pretty big company, that they would, I assume they do things like this as well, and that, would there be a way to cooperate with a private entity?
Yeah, the public-private partnerships we usually have are with economic development corporations. So Brighton it's the Brighton EDC, and so they've got board members, and it's a public-private entity that so I'm not actually working with the city of Brighton, it's with the EDC that they have there. Those ones I usually see work best. As far as entities that are not already together, so you and Blackstone coming together on it, quite frankly, I don't see it work out a ton of times. I mean, we're more than welcome to trying it and seeing how it works, but they've got their agenda, you've got your agenda, and sometimes if they're paying for some of it, it gets really complicated along the way. What we recommend is that the city takes control of it, and that way you have access to all the information. You're driving the ship here, and as they need help, or as you don't want to see another nail salon go in, so you're gonna say, hey, this would be a better fit here. Let's go after these types of folks.
My only thinking is that, and this will be a discussion for the board, and, we can think about this and maybe have a conversation with these other developers, but unless a developer buys into what you're suggesting to them, they hold all the cards. And so if you can say, yeah, Brooks Brothers needs to move in right next to Target because that's what the psychographics look like. Yeah. But they're not going to build the Brooks Brothers if that doesn't seem like that fits their model. So
absolutely, and I'll kind of flip that on the other side and say that so THF has and I'm sorry I'm using Brighton all the time, but it's one of the clients I work with on a daily basis almost. But THS has a big site out there, and what they basically do is they have who they want to go after, but they go to Brighton and say, okay, we really need XYZ retailer. They've shown interest. We just can't get them to pull the trigger on this. They think it's too far away from what they normally do. Well, that's when we can come in and say, okay, here's a report that's saying it's actually not that far away, and helping them out. So not so much telling Brookstone or whoever, Blackstone, this is what we want here, this is what we're going to do in this site, but more just working with them. So who are you seeing interest from? How can we help you on that end, and work together on it to meet the same goal?
Okay. Other questions?
No, I'll just mention that
Yes.
in my meetings with Joe and discussions, we've had the conversation about we got the marketplace that we need to fill, but we need additional commercial development so we can really use this tool for as well. Like the town center, Resolute, those type of things.
So that would be something, we would apply this to like the Ethan Allen pad.
Right, yeah.
Well, and a very intriguing conversation we had when we all format with Joe was best fit analysis is what I call it. So we have all these empty, usually smaller commercial properties at Marketplace. This type of information can yield a report, what are the best fits given the businesses we currently have there.
Absolutely.
Where would the highest probability of success be? Where would the interest lie in terms of the shoppers who shop there, et cetera? So it brings that together and it helps guide us as to who to.
We have reports that'll show you, okay, based on different geographic areas, does this need to be retail, does it need to be restaurant, does it need to be office, does it need to be hospital? I mean, we have reports that can pull all that together for you. And so we can look at it a number of different ways, and it's not an additional cost to look at different sites or do anything like that. We're very much, it's a partnership, so it's just as important to me that you guys are successful as, that it is to you guys that you're successful, because the way we work is that, I rely on recommendations from other communities that we work with to work with new cities. So it's very important that you guys use it, that you understand how to use it, and that's a profitable partnership for both of us. And I know the sticker price, as far as $50,000, especially in these economic times, is it's a lot of money, and I can definitely appreciate that. The one thing that we've talked about when the four of us have sat down is that if you're able to recruit in and fill that RV site or fill that Ethan Allen site, the first year that restaurant or retail concept's in existence, you're going to pay for the Buxton analysis. So it's a matter of finding one and developing that relationship. But just to give you an idea on the ROI of everything, that's what we need to do.
Hey, Joe, can you expand a little bit more on the marketing side of it? So once we identify the businesses that are appropriate for here, then there's a whole marketing package that we produce, and then we mail out specifically to those businesses.
Yeah, absolutely. So we'll get you in contact. So whatever retailers you're interested in pursuing, we'll get you in contact names of the folks that you need to be talking to. We'll put together a pretty substantial marketing package for you. We'll put together tear sheets for you. Whatever you need as you're going forward. We'll send a letter on your behalf that someone from Superior will be contacting that retailer. So there's a lot you can do on your own, and then there's a lot you can do in conjunction with your development community for some of those sites as well. So both fronts, there's a lot of marketing that we can help you out with.
Yeah. You had mentioned about the fire department. The one, I contacted several municipalities that had uses their service, and one town has a volunteer fire department, but they're looking for a paid fire department. So what they did is they modeled each one of the firemen that are there, the volunteer firemen, and what do they look like? What's their psychographic? Then they went out and marketed directly to communities that fit that psychographic, so they're able to get their fire department in place. So there's a lot of uses for this product.
Yeah, not just the economic development. And the big thing for the town of Superior to know is that we'll present you with an initial offering of items and stuff you can look at, but the way you really get the value on everything is coming back to us with specific questions that you guys have. And we've got real estate executives that have been the head of Dave & Buster's and Staubach and a lot of big players, Tandy Corporation, that can answer a lot of incentive questions. It can answer a lot of what are people doing right now. We have a significant private sector side, so we have a good pulse on what the marketplace looks like. There's a lot of ways to utilize our services, and it's very much on the interaction between us two. And I'm out here quite a bit, so I can sit down with Matt or help anybody understand exactly what's going on or any questions that you guys might have. Yes, ma'am.
So I guess I don't think that 50K is that bad given the amount of data that, there's no way someone could cobble together that kind of data in any reasonable amount of time for that kind of money. But I guess I would like some more specifics on the kinds of follow-through that you've got, that your data has sort of led to in other communities.
Absolutely. I would say the best people to call, Charles Ozaki over in Broomfield is familiar with what we've done. We did a project with them a number of years ago. We refreshed it for them and about a year ago, I guess now. Ray Gonzalez over in Brighton, who's their head of their EDC, is another good person to talk to. Both of those I know for sure. And Ray was out at ICSC, and they had a great ICSC conference.
Let's go, but going back a few years, let's say where there might have been follow-through. Has there been follow-through? I mean,
Yeah,
I'm
absolutely.
looking for the kind of ROI, but with numbers. I mean,
As far like you were looking for, okay, how much have they?
yeah, what's the
been able-
payback? Is
paid
it
back?
3-1? Is it, what?
I don't have the data on that, but I can tell you as far as our Colorado clients that are concerned, all of our clients that we've worked with here, with the exception of Fort Lupton, because we just finished their project, have seen a return on investment from our services.
Just greater than 1.
Yes, that's greater than that.
Just
Yeah,
that?
absolutely.
There was a municipality back, I don't know if it was North Carolina, but when I called them, they said that their return was immediate the first year because you identified that a Chick-fil-A would be perfect in their little town. I don't know if you recall which one it was, but
I can't remember off the top.
within a year their money was paid back.
Yeah, and that's the thing is, as far as return on investment for you guys, I feel within the 1 year, because you already have freestanding buildings that you have in the Superior Marketplace that people can move into and they're ready to go. So yes, you can have immediate return on investment. Some other communities that may have to build from scratch or have an idea like your town center, that's going to take a little bit longer to come to fruition. But as far as what you're concerned with right now, when that developer gets set in stone, or Blackstone or whatever they will have some retailers that they have in mind. And if you're working in conjunction with them, then that's where you can see immediate impact. And the cities, I mean, there are cities that make something like $6 million in tax revenue. I think I can't remember the numbers off the top of my head, but they're all a bunch of fancy numbers that'll impress you about the money that cities have made using our services. But I don't have them off the top of my head.
Maybe it's something you can follow up with.
I can follow up with all those fancy numbers.
And I guess if we're talking budget, the one thing I don't think though I don't think this is a substitute for the chamber. So I wouldn't want us to see. I would not want us to see us take the money out of what we give to the chamber. I think it's
Bring us up to release.
I think it's a completely different relationship.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the big thing, and I'll tell you this. You talk about return on investment, you talk about the chamber and all that, is what they do and what you guys do internally is totally different than what we do. We give you the analytic, the data information in order to be successful and really have an intelligent conversation with a lot of these retailers. We don't take the place of anybody or anything
I
like
could
that.
see the chamber actually utilizing this data quite a bit, going back to the businesses that they support. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So Joe, the power user thing up there, that first power user, $12.50 a month, additional $2.50. What's a power user?
You really don't need to worry about
Okay.
that so much. What it is
What if we have all of us power users?
Well, you don't want to. The power user basically gives you the ability to run reports and basically have all the functionality of it. You really only want one person, maybe two, working on that. If you've got 50 people running reports and deleting stuff and adding stuff, it'll get a little hectic. But you can have read-only power users. You can have 50 of those if you wanted to, where people can just go in there and read the reports and look at all that stuff. But yeah, you really, with the size of Superior, you're not going to need more than one. So don't worry about that.
Okay. Well, thanks very much. We probably need to wrap this up now. Next steps, I would believe, is that you'll get in contact with Matt. You'll show us what your, plan would look like, what the dollar figure would look like,
Yeah.
timelines, that kind of thing.
Perfect. All right. Thank you guys very much. You got additional questions, don't hesitate to let me know.
Great. Thanks very much.
you.
Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Next time, don't shy away from the econometrics.
And don't bring up THF anymore.
Oh, sorry.
Bad karma here in the town.
My bad.
Next on the agenda is Eric Finger with Rocky Mountain Energy Management is here. He's done an analysis for us on our wind, our desire to have some wind energy in our green portfolio, I'm calling it now. So he's provided some analysis and some options that hopefully will generate some good discussion. Eric?
Great. Thanks
Hi,
for
how are you
coming.
this evening? Like you said, I'm Eric Finger with Rocky Mountain Energy out of Golden, Colorado.
Okay.
And what this was is to provide the town with essentially a high-level 20,000-foot perspective on what the feasibility of wind generation would be either on-site or off-site. And it started here. I put together about a 15-slide PowerPoint here, and essentially, as you can see, it just kind of runs through. We'll start here with the background. So as I came into this, I was presented with the fact that the town of Superior has a somewhat aggressive sustainability plan or self-sufficiency plan for renewables. And I'd say, compared to even corporate or other municipal objectives, it's aggressive from what I've seen across the U.S. Right now, you've taken in the last couple of years some steps towards renewable and other efficiency measures. Essentially, there's already about 240 kW of solar installed right now, and there'll be another 200 kW coming online. That represents, give or take, about 20% of the town's load right now. That doesn't include street lighting, which is a lot of that's unmetered right now. So, and as that plays into the whole picture there, so what you're left with is, you have this load. You have opportunities to reduce that based on different efficiencies, different processes, other renewable sources such as solar, or what the I guess center point of this project is would wind with one large capital investment accelerate this whole program and meet the requirements. Right now, Xcel Energy does offer an off-site wind program called WindSource, and it's in the top 10 in the U.S. right now. They have plans to extend that as well. But and right now, there's about 60% of the town's load enrolled in that program, and it's about $21 a megawatt or 2.1 cents a kilowatt hour extra you pay on each kilowatt hour consumed a month for that. And there's also, as I mentioned, there's some efficiency measures in place. Part of what we are contracted to do also is identify other opportunities in the efficiency area. And obviously, as I just to circle back, I mean, it's going to take a combination of all these efforts to meet your goal, So how that mix comes out is what we're looking at. I'm sorry. Yeah. So, doesn't quite fit in there, but this is just a breakout of where your usage is at right now. So you can look at the waste facilities at approximately 60%. Fresh water is 13%. Your irrigation's about 11%. This is based on just usage. And actually, the demand portion of this, a lot of facilities aren't like that, but this is pretty parallel. The graph looks almost the same as far as what your load is at any given time in the day. So looking at your renewable wind options here, obviously, like I said, the main thing was, is there an opportunity to have a owned or leased on-site, off-site wind turbine? And what size would that be, and what's the feasibility of that legislation-wise and cost-wise? And just to follow here, the options that you have essentially are, one, you can have something on-site. Two, you could have an off-site that would be located on somebody else's wind farm. That would have to be some kind of leasehold arrangement. Or you could participate in the WindSource program, and there's also a new program coming out that's a longer-term contract arrangement. What I'll do is roll through as far as what each one of those options represent, and then what the hurdles are in place that may prevent you from doing such. Right now you have, based on your current load, if you had something on site to meet, like I said, solar, you're at about 20%. So to fill that 80% void, you need about 2 megawatts. That would be given with a 17 to 22% capacity factor. You could end up with something, this is all hypothetical here, you could end up with a higher capacity factor, say 30%. I mean, NREL is located over there. You know, they may say they have a 17 to 22%, but they operate that as a test facility, not a production facility. So, you know, technically you could get a higher percentage out of that. Based on that, you know, the cost of a turbine per megawatt hour right now, turnkey, is probably around your $2.2 to $2.5 million. And you have some other operational costs and maintenance to go along with that. And that's somewhat proportionate if you want. I mean, there's some economies of scale there. If you wanted, you know, 2 megawatt, there'd be some site work that cost would come down a bit. And same thing on equipment if it was smaller. You know, based on this, you know, your simple payback, you know, would be around 14 years, 17 years. There's a lot of variables that aren't outlined here that come into play on that. So if you did just, you know, your quick math on that, and they would, you know, regulations would allow you to take that power one for one and distribute it amongst your meters, you know, that payback might be shorter, 10 years, 9 years. Where this works well is when you have a large facility, you know, such as a large manufacturer or a mining facility that has a, you know, that facility itself may have one single primary meter with a 5 megawatt load, whereas you have a distributed load across, you know, maybe 40, 50 meters. Primarily, 95% of that's on 12 meters. But so the problem you run into here, like I said, even if you had the footprint, if you had the performance testing that came out that looked favorable, the problem you run into right now is the way the Colorado PUC is set up and regulations in place is that, as the description I mentioned, if you had a mining facility or something where you could try and take care of 100% of your load at 1 meter and have that wind turbine on that property. As now, same with your solar, you're limited to 120% of that site's annual usage. So the problem is when you have your load spread across multiple meters throughout the community, is how do you get the power from that turbine to those multiple meters? And what that requires is something referred to as virtual net metering. And essentially that's where the utility takes the power generated from that one large single source and will distribute it through their billing system against your other 15 or 20 sites. That doesn't exist in Colorado right now. There's some baby steps towards that. There's a new solar garden program that's in place that kind of leads to that. There's also other states that have had this for the last couple of years, such as California. You have a lot of interest in this in New England because the cost of electricity is, you know, threefold here, and it's a deregulated market. Now, offsite wind turbine, again, in this instance, you would have a higher capacity factor because you would be at a place that was selected for wind. So you'd probably be in that 35 to 40% range. Now, that said, that takes your required size of turbine down because your capacity factor of generation is higher. But there's also hurdles in place here with, you know, this would require, one, somebody to be a developer, you know, investor partner in this. And as it stands right now, there's a PTC or producer tax credit that's out there that's just about to expire, and it's not set to be extended as of right now. So that takes away some of the interest you would have from some developers. But the other issue is, this is, like I said, it's not a mainstream approach. There's nobody out there right now in Colorado that's done such an arrangement, and even some of the developers that I work with, I mean, they're all over the U.S. They haven't seen that done yet either. And it's just because the level that you're working with, you probably have to, you'd probably have to do a 2-turbine or something to get anybody's, brief attention on that. And if it was, you have to look at it from a developer's perspective. If you have, 200 turbines in place, what's in it for them to put up 2, on a sidebar agreement. Provided you could find somebody to take this venture. The issue you would have, I just covered these first 2 with the size and the PTC, but also as this comes back to the main issue of how do you get power from point A to B. And obviously what you'd end up with is essentially a financial arrangement whereby the power from that turbine would be sold, probably would be part of that overall agreement of the whole farm, but for X amount per kilowatt hour, kind of round-the-clock price. However, that price is going to be less than what you're going to pay. There's going to be a differential between your revenue and your cost at your site because, again, there's no programs in place or legislation right now to support any kind of, quote, virtual net metering on this scale or to have any kind of private production whereby the revenue generated from that would be a direct offset on your various meters. So what you would end up with is, essentially comes back to almost what the wind source program is, where you're going to end up with an adder, so to speak, a differential for that green energy. The other problem you run into with this investor-owned is that, one, if the PTC came back, that says that they have to own that for 10 years. So it would be a lease arrangement until 10 years, then you could take ownership. For that first 10 years, they'd take all the RECs on that probably, which is your renewable energy credits. And then also, like I said, you'd have the issue of that differential between what you generated and what you actually paid at the meter. So based on those issues, kind of takes you into this is the, I guess, easier approach, but it comes down to what's your overall goal is to be, completely self-generation or to be sustainable and green. And as you know, a lot of these programs, other companies have taken part in this. A lot of the ski resorts do this already. This is, as far as wind source. So you pay this 0.21 cents per kilowatt hour premium, and essentially this is doing what the same model would do if you own 2 turbines on that site. But because this is facilitated through Excel, it's probably more advantageous. Right now the program costs you 2.1 cents. When the new program comes out, you wouldn't be able to allocate all your load to that, but let's say you could take care of 70% or so. I would think that cost is going to be about half that probably. So for 10% additional cost, you're going to have this green energy to fill the void in your on-site renewables. So if you had that, just hypothetically speaking, if we had those 2 turbines on that site, you'd be lucky to come out at a penny differential. It could be 4 cents. It could be $40 a megawatt hour versus what you're paying at the meter and what you're actually going to get off of the energy sold from that turbine. So right now, like I said, there's 60% of the load enrolled. It costs about $38,000 a year for that. In the same program right now, to fulfill the rest of the load would be about $64,000. And the new program, which comes online January 2013, the enrollment for that's going to be probably within the next, I would say, 3 to 6 months. And that's kind of like a reservation, first come, first served is what's going to end up be. But so that could take that cost down to where you could fulfill 100% of your requirement probably for $35,000 or something like that.
Total or extra?
That's extra on top of your current cost. Well, no, that would be, you're spending $38,000 now, it'd probably be a wash if you could get enrolled into that other program.
So, can I just ask a quick
Yeah,
question?
go ahead.
Why is this advantageous over paying your electric bill?
Excuse me?
Why is this advantageous over paying the electric bill? I mean,
Well, you are paying the electric bill.
Right,
Okay.
but I mean, but you're paying a premium on top of it.
Yeah.
I don't get the.
Okay, the premium is.
I don't get it.
Well, Excel has multiple generation sources, whether it be a gas turbine, natural gas turbine, or a coal-fired plant. And in addition to that, they have wind turbines out there that they've done long-term contracts with particular farms that are developer-owned. And so that meets they're required to have a renewables mix in that whole generation portfolio. So what this program does is for folks to say, we want to have 100% renewable energy, that allocates part of that load. So essentially it matches or pairs what's being generated with what the demand is on the other side. Now, you're not exactly getting that, exact power from that, but it does that allocation in their portfolio. So what's the benefit of it? It's, if you want to say that you're sustainable and you're using green energy or not. That's what it is. I mean, some people think it's not worth the price right now. Other people say that meets their requirement. So,
Yeah, personally, it sounds just political. It sounds good to say you are,
well, it's not. I
renewable.
won't say it's not to the degree where you're out buying RECs or something like that, or carbon credits, which that market hasn't quite developed. This is. I mean, they have. If they have 400 megawatts of load out there, they're going to have, based on what the load shift is through the day, but they could have 600 megawatts of customers signed up. So there is somewhat of a one-to-one pairing there. So it's not a complete just fallacy or made up program. It is supported by actual wind generation. So or if there's another measure of and they've actually had exceeded their wind source program, and they do buy from Kansas right now as well through the transmission tri-state transmission grid. So. And this, just like I said, this is just going back to the utility-sponsored program. And again, this is, does the cost meet your needs, and will the program itself, for the time being at least, meet your requirement towards sustainability? And again, what's the certainty of the program in the future? It's based on their customer demand, but they've been pretty successful so far. So I wouldn't think in the next 10 years that would waver at all. And obviously, like I said, it's not quite the same as having a turbine on your own property or saying that you have a turbine somewhere else. But it does, if it's a choice between trying to find a development partnership and signing up for that program, that's probably the most economical option right now. And this is just your key components here that I ran through. You have your solar, you're 21% now. Wind, what part does that play? Is it the program that we just spoke about? Is it on-site generated or off-site? Reduction, most utilities have realized too it's a lot easier to come up with efficiency measures and sponsor those than it is to bring new generation online. So, the cost of a solar project to produce 150,000 kilowatt hours versus the cost of maybe a plant upgrade to save that same amount could be exponentially different. And then management too, just as far as to know what you're using, when you're using it, and how to track this whole program going in the future. So, and again, what's this mix look like? Like I said, it could be based on current things, it could be 50% solar. You could have a small turbine, 30%, or you could have a participation in the program we just discussed, and efficiency measures could take that to 15% as well. So just the considerations. Last slide here. Obviously with those barriers in place, regulation-wise, is this a premature endeavor. Obviously, there's no doubt within the next 5 years that there'd probably be a bigger marketplace for this regulation-wise. I mean, if we have the same programs in place, say, that California would, obviously if natural gas prices escalated, it would make this look more favorable as well. Also, as far as capital projects, is the money dedicated to this program in the meantime better allocated somewhere else that may have accelerated payback? And again, as far as the net metering goes too, is could you maximize those sites right now that can take that 120%? So that would be your wastewater facility and your water. Where your water, you're probably at 60% right now after the new solar's in. And the wastewater, you still have about 100% because you'll be at about 20 then. So you have a lot of room, real estate provided, that you could expand and take advantage of what programs are in place now. And then, like I said, this goes back to the, what's around the corner here, if that net metering legislation will change. And there are one-off arrangements out there with different, Denver Water and that. They have their own small hydro turbines. They sell that back to Excel and different things. There are these agreements out there. So, I mean, if it was something that, it's not an impossible task, it just would take quite a bit of, lobbying and additional feasibility work to determine if that was an acceptable practice or not. So, and I'll just open this up to any questions here. Yeah.
In 15 seconds, can you
Yeah.
answer bullet points 1 and 2 there?
Yeah. As far as, like I said, is this the right time, and are financially more attractive alternatives available? And by that I mean, like I said, is this the right time? Because, one, a lot of these projects, just when you look at equipment costs too, I mean, are not favorable unless you have some kind of government incentive. So that said, each year these costs are decreasing, whether it be for solar or wind equipment. In addition to that is legislation is not set up right now to support some of these options. So if the PUC would pass and Excel would support some of these alternatives, then this would be a much more feasible or easy task to undertake in maybe 2 years, 3 years, 5 years. It's hard to say. So, and it just depends, economic climate, what the commodity prices do as well. So, and the reason a lot of these things are more feasible, like I said, if you're in the East Coast and your average cost is 25 or 30 cents a kilowatt hour versus 10 here, and plus you have a deregulated market and you have these virtual net metering legislation in place, then it's it's feasible. But you don't have really Colorado that isn't constrained so much for transmission. There's a lot of factors there that could make this work in the future, but what the ultimate motivation is going to be, whether it be community lobbying or corporate lobbying, that's hard to say. And number two there, and that's just what I said, is that the money allocated for possible wind project in the meantime, if that's something that accrues, based on an annual or what have you, could that be spent, on additional solar or efficiency projects that would one, either reduce your total town load requirement or help fill that void on the renewable side. So,
Thank you.
Okay, thanks. We'll probably have to wrap it up just because of the
Yeah.
timeline here. So it seems like, Mr. Magley, you'll be working on the reducing our energy consumption through things that we talked about
Right.
in our budget. And it would be interesting to hear what the Excel plan might look like, and maybe it would make sense to chat with them some more.
yeah, if you have any other questions, feel free to email me.
Great. All right, thanks so much.
Thank you very much.
We're going to take a couple-minute break just for the board members, and then we'll maybe start at 7:05, if that's okay. Welcome, everybody. I'd like to call to order a regular meeting of the Board of Trustees of Superior for September 26, 2011. And Phyllis, if you call the roll.
Okay. Mayor Andrew Muckle,
Here.
Mayor Pro Tem Emilia Gregori,
Here.
Trustees Joe Sorelli,
Here.
Chris Hansen,
Here.
Sandy Pennington,
Here.
Lisa Skumas,
Here.
Deborah Williams,
Here.
Town Manager Matt Magley,
Here.
Town Attorney Kendrick Carberry, thank you,
Here.
Town Clerk Bill Sweeney.
Great, thanks. That brings us to item number 3, approval of the agenda. Are there any changes to tonight's agenda? Trustee Williams?
Yes, there's a correction in the minutes on page 49.
Okay. So we'll discuss that at the end
Alright.
of the consent agenda. Any other changes?
To the agenda?
Trustee
So-
Pennington?
Yeah, well, is this the time to pull the stuff from the consent agenda?
Yes.
This is the
Okay.
time?
Well, I suggest we pull C and D, C.
Okay. Any other changes? Seeing none, I want to entertain a motion to approve the agenda with those changes by trustee Skumat, second by trustee Sorelli. Discussion, all in favor? Unanimous, thank you. That brings us to item number 4, reports, questions, and issues. Who would like to start? Trustee Hansen?
First, Matt, what happened to my really cool microphone?
There and back order. Sorry.
Now we got to lean
That
over.
happens. Yeah.
I attended a ProStack meeting last Wednesday evening, and ProStack is going to move forward with reaching out to the community south of Colton to find out more about what those residents would like, such as trails, trail improvements, parks, park improvements, and so forth. And that's going to happen probably mid-October. It'll start happening mid-October. And per Trustee Williams' suggestion, I signed up for the SAC committee at Superior Elementary School, the Superior Elementary Accountability Committee, and I've become the community member there. So I'm excited to participate in that group. But we're going to be looking into how the town can be more involved with Superior Elementary School as well as the Chamber of Commerce. So I'm looking forward to those future meetings. That's it.
Trustee Sorelli?
Last week, there was a good discussion group as part of the On the Same Page program here, right here at Town Hall. Trustee Pennington and I am both here, and it was about the book, The Worst Hard Times. And, there's, if everybody gotten one of those bookmarks, there's follow-up activities to go to in both Louisville and Lafayette. Today, along with Trustee Williams, we had a meeting with RTD officials who are considering possible alternatives to service changes to the town of Superior. This could be significant to us, and I urge our residents who are concerned about this to plan to attend a public hearing that RTD is going to have for this area at the Louisville Rec Center. It's October 6th at 7 p.m. So they'll present in that hearing their planned changes and accept comments. They probably do not have time or will not be willing to engage in discussions, but will accept comments that will then all go to the RTD board before final decisions are made. So it's important for residents to attend that meeting. There's potential reduction or possible loss of important services to our community, as all of the communities are facing that around here, but we need to be paying attention to that. As part of the Rocky Flat Stewardship Council activities, Matt did the application for admittance to the Stewardship Council get published somewhere, or is that going to be?
For the appointment, or for the open
Open
positions?
for the,
Yeah.
for the private or individual people?
Right, yeah, we published that.
And where was that published?
On the town website, and I'm not sure if we did an e-blast on that one or not, and then...
I don't recall seeing
It was
an
on
e-blast.
Facebook as well.
Okay.
so.
Anyway, the Rocky Flats Stewardship Council is currently accepting applications they have 4 non-governmental members of the Stewardship Council that serve on a 2-year term, and individuals or organizations can apply for those positions. And anyone interested should look at the sites that Matt mentioned, and submit an application, and interviews, I believe, will be conducted in November by the Stewardship Council. And finally, we just all had the Finance Committee meeting today. And yet another one.
Yes. Very good. Thank you. Trustee Skumatz.
I had a coffee buzz a little over a week ago, and one of the things that came out of that I added to the town's Ask Superior, and I did get a response from the first acknowledgement response, but it's only number 11, so either we're doing great or no one's using it yet. So please don't treat it in any special way. I just want to see how it tracks normally through the system. But for one of the people who came to the coffee buzz, it was more convenient for me to do it, and it gave me a chance to track it as well. There were a couple other things to follow up on as well, and I'll talk with you about that after the fact. I also attended the APWA conference, American Public Works Association conference, not on the town's dime, but just on my own. And if anyone's particularly interested in the agenda from that, I'm happy to. Why don't you just send me an email and I'll send you that. Finance Committee, I talked about it. I also circulated a memo to board members mentioning that a board that I'm a member of is going to be evaluating some food waste type programs around the country, but also evaluating a program that's happening here in Superior. I just want to be transparent about that, and so I sent an email or a note around today about that. And unless there's any difficulty, I think I tried to be very clear about it.
Great. Thanks. Let's see, for the sake of time, I'll just say that I attended the U.S. 36 Mayors and Commissioners. Not a whole bunch more information to report. There was some discussion about an RTD sales tax increase for 2012 and some discussion about how to extend the managed lanes as far as possible to the northwest of Boulder, but that's ongoing. Trustee Williams.
I attended 2 RTD meetings. The first one was an open house that we had here at the town hall, and there were a good 30, 40 people. And the majority of the folks that were here were talking about the Superior Call and Ride and how they do not want to see that service go. There weren't as many people there to discuss or support the 228, but all in all, what we came away with was don't change anything for RTD. So we ended up meeting with RTD a week later, and that meeting was this morning with Trustee Sorelli, and they seem pretty receptive in some of our ideas, and we'll see where they go with that. Their idea of working with us was wonderful walking out the door, but we'll have to see how that all transpires. So I'm not promising anything, but I'm hoping for the best. I also attended a Open Space Advisory Committee meeting, and we discussed the Hodgkin-Harris Reservoir, and most of the members weighed in and felt the project had, real merit, and the majority expressed support for it. So that was good to hear from, the Open Space Advisory Committee, because potentially could be using some open space funds for that. And I also went to a Monarch High School Accountability Committee, and that was very good, and just the first one, so we'll see how we can utilize the town with Monarch High School in Louisville and being a good neighbor. And I'm also on the El Dorado K-8 School Accountability Committee. So we've already met, and I think I talked about that last time, so I'll move on. We also have a committee chairs meeting
Yes.
this Wednesday with the board. So that's Wednesday night.
That's correct.
And I think Wednesday night, there's also a library board of trustees meeting that neither one of us will be able to make that. Unfortunately.
Okay, thanks. Trustee Gergeros?
Nothing to report other than to say it's nice to see so many people here today, especially a lot of the youth, and I'm sure they have to go home and do some of their homework, so we'll try to go as fast as we can.
Trustee Pennington?
Yes, attended a Dr. Cog meeting, Denver Regional Council of Governments, last Wednesday, and various things happened. Boulder City and Boulder County actually got a lot of funding for some bicycle and alternative transportation projects. So that was, productive for this part of the county. But thing that came up in there actually was during public comment, Comcast, who can't promote itself, apparently, in this respect, informed the group and asked us to pass on that they are making internet available to anybody who qualifies for the National School Lunch Program at a fixed $10 a month, and a low-cost computer at a fixed $150 plus tax, or whatever the tax is on that. We've already alerted the principals of the schools around here, but please pass that on to anybody who may qualify. I think those rates are quite good. I think it's a great public initiative. Matt, I'm hoping that the October Superior Sentinel will actually go into the details of signing up for Go Request and participating in Ask Superior, because I think that has the potential to be a very powerful program. George Kuffner, Sr., can you hear me? We are looking into painting those stripes on Marshall Road. We discussed it in the Finance Committee meeting, so that's going to be pursued and researched a little bit more, so I thought you'd be happy to hear that.
I am, because I have a comment. Thank you.
And then on the call and ride issue, should that survive, and I'm hoping it does because I've actually benefited from using that, I hope we as a town promote it aggressively. I think some of the lower usership may be because our community needs to be reminded more about how they can use it, when they can use it, how they can report problems, because definitely we've had reliability issues. I've called, for those early morning pickups and nobody has arrived, so I ended up having to take my own car, and those are the things I think we've got to aggressively report so we get the service level so we can rely on using that and hence can have the usership numbers. So if it survives, I suggest we get fairly aggressive about promoting it.
And we discussed that with RTD this morning, and they would not buy that.
Well, they weren't getting the
Even firsthand
complaints.
experience, they would not.
So they have to be called, told, so that they know.
Yeah, I called Call and Ride to complain, but it only is reasonable to expect they didn't call their funders and say we fell short. So we've got it, but I think if we manage it and actually get the ridership out of it, that I know we can, we won't have this debate down the road as to whether or not it's self-sustaining. That's all.
Great, thanks. Mr. Bagley?
So the meeting on Wednesday was mentioned. That's at 6 p.m., just so everybody knows, for the joint advisory committee chairs. We have the Fish and Wildlife Environmental Assessment pre-brief meeting on Wednesday. I'm not sure who was going to that, or were you planning on going to that?
Yeah, I'm planning on doing it, but...
Yeah. I think we can RSVP for whoever's available. Let's see, some follow-up from previous meetings. We contacted the applicants for the Open Space Advisory Committee that weren't selected to see if they are interested in the pro-staff vacancies.
Are they? Have the answer?
I don't have the answer for you, but we have 2 applications so far. The alleyways in Original Town, the inlet work for the north half of the alley in South Original Town is being worked on right now. Should be completed by the end of next week, I think it was. And then the drainage improvements for the south portion of that alley have been completed.
Is that the one off Douglas Street?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah. Huh?
the north end is Douglas.
And then I made revisions to the agenda, the two bullets, the last two bullets on the public comment procedure. So if you get a chance, take a look and let me know if that's what the board was interested in seeing there. And then the last. Let's see. I think that was all I had.
Great, thanks very much, Ms. Carberry.
Nothing for me, thank you.
Ms. Harden.
Nothing for me.
All right, that brings us to item number 5, public comment on consent agenda and non-agenda items. I know there must be somebody.
Dana D'Souza, 1752 Eldorado Drive, also chair of OSAC. I wanted to just kind of make a comment about the vote that happened at the last meeting regarding the appointment of OSAC members, and also maybe give you a bit of a view on how it was viewed on this side of the board. A little bit of background: in March we had a committee member resign and wasn't able to fill the rest of her term. We also had a committee member who has been out on medical leave for quite some time, and we were short members, and we really needed someone to fill in at that time. And we did have an applicant who was known by many of the committee members and also known by the board for her work and volunteerism with the town. And she was willing to step up. She followed the proper process. She attended all the meetings, filled out the proper paperwork, and even met with the board. And it was, although obviously not guaranteed, but it was suggested that she would be appointed. And instead, the board opened it up to a process for allowing everyone to, anyone interested to apply, which I think is completely appropriate when we have people that are finishing out their terms, and we have that. But in this case, we really needed someone. And so instead, 6 months later, we finally have the positions filled. And I really see that as a failure of the board to understand and to look at what the committee needed at that time. We had some really large decisions that we wanted to have voting members for, and we didn't. And I also see it as a failure of a resident who followed all the processes and who has already spent a lot of time devoting time to the town and was not recognized for that. And then I guess I was also somewhat confused by the vote because the board had the advice of the chair. It also had the advice of the past chair for several years and ignored that. And even our board liaison ignored the advice and voted against the recommendations. And I guess I'm wondering why would the board, on something so simple as appointing a member of who we will be working with on a regular basis, why would the board not follow that advice? And if they don't follow advice on something so simple as that, what really are we giving advice about? I mean, on the larger items, I'm concerned then that we're not going to have, that the board's not going to follow our advice. And it really does. That's my view on how I saw this happen, and I was really frustrated and disappointed to see that happen. And then I did have a question on process as far as this. And actually, Sandy, I was hoping maybe this is something you could look into and get back to us. What is the process for having a board liaison changed? If the board liaison misrepresents themselves and the board to the committee and also fails to represent the committee's desires to the board, what would be the process then for having that committee member or that board liaison changed? So I'm hoping that that's something I could get an answer back on that. Thanks. Those are just my comments.
All right, thank you very much for your time.
If I can respond as a
Sure.
board member to that, we're having a board liaison, board advisory commission chair meeting on Wednesday night that's specifically being assembled to address a lot of the issues that you raised, Dana. There are, of course, two sides to all of this. There was There are a lot of variables in these decisions. We're working very hard to set up a process that stands the test of time, that transcends any particular group of elected trustees, that will be there as the process to follow. And the purpose of this meeting Wednesday night is to help refine, to hone, to hash out these variables. So I hope you're there, and I think there will be some better understanding of the process we followed for this particular vote at that meeting.
I just wonder if you could possibly have the information available for that meeting, that would be great, so that.
This
Okay.
information?
You gotta-
I'll leave,
So, yeah.
I'll leave that to staff.
I'll be
Yeah,
there.
okay.
Perfect, thank you. Additional public comment on consent agenda or non-agenda items? Oh, I'm sorry.
I was going to say we might want to consider differences in process for filling in versus end of terms, but it's
Okay.
a good point.
Ready?
Hmm?
Gladys Forshey, 404 South Third Avenue. Excuse me if my voice comes and goes. I don't know if you are aware that staff decided to do a survey in Original Town and Sagamore regarding the bike race. And I wanted to know what the cost of that survey was to get that organized and done. Was it done by outside personnel? Was it done by staff, created by staff?
It was done internally using SurveyMonkey. So
Using SurveyMonkey.
except for the copies of the survey that we provided to you, there
Yeah.
was no cost.
Yeah, okay. I have, Matt was very good and gave me copies of these surveys to distribute hard copy within Original Town because of the fact that there's a number of people in Original Town that is not on the internet, doesn't have electronic mail, doesn't get the electronic newsletter, whatever, even though the postcard was sent out, they still would not go on and do it via internet. So, excuse me, I asked him for 20 copies 3 different times to circulate among Original Town. I have 25 of those copies back. There's still some floating around. So I'm going to give these to you.
Yeah.
Thanks.
This is the second time that Original Town has spoken about this bike race because we did a petition in the spring that was totally ignored. So I certainly hope that this time, this is once before the race and now this is after the race. So I hope staff gets the idea that the bike race is not wanted in Original Town. It's almost October. Is the trash scenario for Original Town Sagamore being worked on yet?
Right. RFP goes out 1st of October.
I had asked once about why a fireworks ordinance couldn't be created and passed. Of course, I've heard nothing about that. Didn't get an answer at the time. I wanted to know if a fireworks ordinance can be created for this town.
So we do have one.
We do have one.
So we already have one in place. I guess I don't have it in front of me. I don't know if the attorney knows off the top of her head.
But it seems as
but we had definitely
Yeah, we can sit down and talk about
It
it.
seems as though the sheriff doesn't have enough power with it or whatever
yeah,
the scenario is. So why
Yeah, I
can't
think
it?
it's not the power. The sheriff has the power. The problem is with fireworks, can't be everywhere all at once. I think is the issue.
Okay, so the sheriff does have the power to do something.
Yeah.
It's an issue in Rock Creek, too.
It's an issue every city.
Yeah,
Every
it's
city
not
in the
just
state
Superior.
has an issue with
I
it.
understand that, but it just seems like that it's a little worse here than it is in other cities. Matt, you had told me in the spring that you was going to be organizing a meeting with residents regarding Children's Park. I haven't heard any more about that meeting.
Okay, that's something you can work offline if that's okay.
Sure.
Okay. in this packet is a complaint that I have filed with the state of Colorado. You've been told about this packet before, or about this complaint before. Those of you that don't come to Original Town very often are probably not aware that Fifth Avenue has been cleaned up, fenced, and I asked Matt for a figure of what that cost. He come back today and told me $4,850 was the price that we taxpayers paid.
That includes the price for the survey that we had to have done to make sure we were in the.
So it was the survey and the fence is what he was telling me. Now, I've tried to talk to Matt about this before, excuse me, about this before, because this activity was done to benefit a developer. Now, this developer was a problem in Rock Creek when Rock Creek was created, and he's carried it down here to Original Town now. Town shouldn't bend to the developers. The developers pay the town. That we've got it wrong here. That's benefiting Remington Homes, Ochsner, regarding a pipe project, which is wrong. That pipe project is going to require that dirt be moved. Now, once dirt is moved, you're violating the residents' water rights in the town of Superior. Now, the town has never done anything to protect the original town residents and our water rights. And that's one reason for this claim that I filed. Because I'm not going to put up with the developer at all. My water rights are holier than thou, and you guys need to understand that. Some of you still have trouble understanding that. Water Court has no records of Remington Homes owning water rights, no records of Ochsner owning water rights, no records of the town of Superior owning water rights out of Coal Creek. Original town residents have those water rights out of Coal Creek, junior and senior. You need to understand, our water rights are much stronger than you are, and ever will be. I've tried to tell Matt that he needs to talk to the state, because if 1 tablespoon of dirt is moved...
Would it be okay if this is something, you can...
No,
we
it's
can work
not
this out
okay because of the
offline,
fact that
because
this is
if
going
you're-
to be affecting taxpayers' dollars.
Okay.
And so therefore, it can be discussed at the town board meeting. Because what's going to happen, if the town manager doesn't contact the state and follow rules and regulations like he's supposed to, it's going to end up that you're going to be using my local tax dollars to fight me in court, or the state using my state tax dollars to defend me. You need to educate your town manager that he needs to talk to the state and start following the laws.
Okay, thank you.
May I ask a question, Matt?
If it has to do with any claim, I would be a little cautious about any questions you might be asking.
Just about the children's park
Oh,
discussion.
yes.
Is
Thank
that
you.
something that should be taken up in ProStack?
Sure. I mean, Gladys has, she's always wanted the play equipment to be moved out of that park, along with the shelter. And that's,
I'll discuss with Jim
core
Payne
issue.
offline on.
Yeah, okay. Additional,
That's not the issue.
right. Additional public comment on consent agenda or non-agenda items?
Can I talk about the windmill?
You can, anything that's on your mind.
Brent Bickel, 862 Eldorado Drive. I came here tonight because I read a story in the camera that the town was considering spending, I guess it turned out to be $5 million for a windmill. I didn't understand it was just a proposal for somebody to come and talk to us. But what I found was interesting about the proposal was that most municipalities that have a sustainability percentage have it about 10 to 50%, and ours is 100. And of course, as Trustee Williams pointed out, and as the gentleman explained, we could just write a big check every year to Xcel Energy for $64,000. Well, Before I came over tonight, I was looking at wind turbines, and for about $75,000, you could get a small commercial turbine, like you may have seen at a Walmart or in a large retail or something, that generates about 15 to 20 kilowatt hours of electricity for that same amount, and then we could put it somewhere, in a prominent place, so people could see it. So that's all I have to say.
Very good, thank you. Yeah, so I mean, I think it's an interesting comment. We're not going to be spending a big chunk of change until we fully understand what all the issues are, but point well taken. Additional public comment on consent agenda or non-agenda items? I'm looking at you, George. No? Okay. That brings us to item number 6, presentations. And tonight we have the fortunate opportunity that Mr. Garnett has come to speak with us, and welcome very much.
Great. Thanks very much for having me. I'm Stan Garnett, District Attorney in the 20th Judicial District, which is Boulder County. I really appreciate the chance to spend just a couple of minutes. And I'll tell you, just in case you're worried, I spent 8 years on the Boulder School Board sitting through meetings like this, so I know the importance of somebody who can get to the point. And let me also thank Mayor Muckle. Gave me a very nice letter of condolence in conjunction with my dad, which I really appreciate. He was a 1943 grad of Boulder High School, so he saw a lot of changes in Boulder County. Earlier this summer, I had lunch with all the mayors of Boulder County, except for the mayor of Ward. I haven't been able to figure out who the mayor of Ward is. If anybody knows who that is, let me know, and I'll track him down. I would note that Ward is the only city in Colorado, I think, that has a volunteer police force. And Sheriff Pelley and I are not quite sure what a volunteer police force is, but they have it. Anyway, one of the things I realized in chatting with folks was the importance of my office, getting to know all of you and making sure you understand how we interact with law enforcement and how we can be of service to your communities. So let me take just a minute describing what the DA's office does and how we can be of help to you and make sure you know how to get in touch with us in case you have an issue. I also brought one of my deputies, Jane Walsh. She'll talk for just a minute about the new community protection unit that we put together. The Boulder DA's office has a total staff of 75 people, 28 lawyers. We're based primarily in the Justice Center at 6th and Canyon. We also have a satellite office in Longmont. Our deputy, we have of the 28 lawyers we have are divided into several different units. We have 6 lawyers who prosecute misdemeanors. We have 4 lawyers who prosecute sex assault and domestic violence cases. We have 3 lawyers who prosecute juvenile cases. I have 3 lawyers that focus on white collar, and pretty much everybody else does what we call street crime, or they call themselves a knife and gun club. I also have a number of investigators, all of whom are peace officers, all of whom are former police officers somewhere in Boulder County. My job under the Constitution is to prosecute violations of state law that occur within Boulder County. I work closely with all the police departments in the county. You guys have a terrific relationship with the sheriff. Sheriff Pelley runs a great office, and I know he's got a contract with the town of Superior and has for some time. I talked with him this afternoon. He believes the relationship works very well, and I think certainly from my staff's point of view, it's a very good relationship. We work well with the sheriff. The important thing for you guys to know is that any case in which you hear from residents of Superior about concern about public safety, law enforcement issues, anything like that, we will do everything we can to be responsive. We have clear priorities in my office. 4 types of cases that we pursue very seriously with and seek incarceration in virtually every case. The first is violent crime, which includes home burglary, because that's certainly a case that has a huge impact on people. Also included within violent crime is sex assault and domestic violence. Second is serious drug dealing, which means cocaine, methamphetamine, and heroin in large amounts, which we have, unfortunately, a fair amount of that in Boulder County. Third is white-collar crime, which means any kind of economic crime in which businesses or individuals or citizens are victims. And finally is public corruption, which fortunately we don't have much in Boulder County. In the time I've been DA, We've had a couple of cases involving police officers have been relatively minor, but we still make them a top priority. One of the things I learned after I took over in 2009 is that the pattern of crime in Boulder County has changed over the years. We're seeing less and less street crime, and we're seeing more and more economic crime. There's a couple of reasons for that. I think the primary one is that the demographic in Boulder County is getting older. And one of the realities of all of us getting older is that we spend less time drinking too much on Friday and Saturday night down in the malls on Pearl Street and beating each other up after we get out, which is where a lot of our street crime comes from. However, Boulder County is a wealthy, relatively wealthy demographic. And what you see with wealthy demographics, particularly with a lot of senior citizens, is that people that want to take advantage of people will prey on those populations. So we set up a unit several months ago called the Community Protection Unit, which absorbed the prior Consumer Protection Unit in the office. And I asked Jane Walsh to head that unit. She works with a couple of non-lawyer staff members and a full component of volunteers who work with really two things. One is educating the public, making sure people know how to protect themselves from financial crime or consumer crime. And secondly, when people are victimized, making sure that we take steps on their behalf to help them recover money and to help punish whoever took the money. You may have noticed last week, on Friday, she sent out a notice about a Medicare fraud scam that's happening in Boulder County, particularly in Longmont. One of the things we really consider our obligation is to make people aware of those sort of things so that we can protect them. First, they can protect themselves, and secondly, if they do get victimized, they know who to call. So let me introduce Jane, who will talk for just a couple of minutes about what she does, and then we're happy to answer any questions.
Great, thanks so much.
Thanks very much, Stan. Good evening, members of the board. It's nice to have the opportunity to come and tell you a little bit about the new Community Protection Division that we have at the DA's office here. And we could be described kind of as the front end of the economic and white-collar crimes unit. So what we're doing is we're dealing with consumers and other members of the community who come to us because they feel that they have a problem, they may have been exploited in some way. And it's our job to see which of those consumer complaints we can resolve, which of them may need some litigation under the Consumer Protection Act, and which of them, frankly, should be going straight to the police and making a report and coming through as our white-collar crime. And we are seeing a pretty significant increase in the amount of elder financial exploitation that is coming through our office. As Stan has said, as the community is aging, and I guess many people might regard us as a fairly fortunate community because there is wealth here, there is money, and unfortunately that's the sort of thing that attracts fraudsters and scammers to the area. So it is important, from our point of view, it's really important that members of the community should let us know, even if they feel that they've been ripped off in a pretty minor way, because what we're also doing is we're compiling a database of people who are doing business throughout the county. And for instance, just in the last week, we've identified a target based on the number of small complaints that have been received over a period of time. So they're being entered into our database, and then we're able to say, okay, it looks like this guy is actually making a living out of taking small amounts of money from a large number of people. And then we can go after that type of individual. So it's a great privilege, as Stan has said. It's an important part of our job to educate people in the community. And so next week we'll be going out to present some seminars to young people, really to kind of encourage them to think about ways in which they can protect themselves as they're starting out. So we'll be speaking to 120 students next week, which should be fun. And we also go to, at anybody's request, if they feel that it would be useful to have education on credit freezes, on identity theft, anything like that, we're happy to come to anywhere. We're going to elder housing developments and senior centres and talking there as well. So we aim to be approachable for anyone who's having a help moment. Don't hesitate to call us up and we can refer you on to the appropriate agency if we can't help you ourselves.
And let me add in, Jane does a great job, and of course that great Scottish accent. But, one of the things we find, particularly with elder abuse and elder exploitation, is a lot of times people are very embarrassed that this happened to them, and they need to know that there's somebody safe that they can call. And that's what Jane is and her staff. They're very well trained to hear people and to just kind of help deal with the angst and help them figure out whether this is just something you need to forget about and move on, or whether it's something that we can be helpful with. So it's another reason we're coming around. We want you to know we're available. We want your elders in your community, senior citizen groups to know that we're available. We want to do everything we can to help and to be available.
Great, thanks so much. I want to say thank you for all your time in public service, because it's not just as the Attorney General, and as you mentioned, the school board, that's potentially a thankless task, so thank you for your public service. But questions, Trustee Skumatz?
Yes, I wanted to thank you. One of the services that you have offered, I think, is an advocate or something like that, somebody who tracks a case for a person and keeps you informed. You guys called me to let me know that I wasn't having a problem getting the guy to do the deck work because he was just slow, but rather because he was a scammer. And you called me and said, we found your name among all these, whatever, and we're doing a case. Would you, like to participate or, hear about it or be kept abreast? I would never have realized it. It was very proactive of you, and I really appreciate it. I didn't have to babysit. You guys babysat me. It was really nice. So thank you. It's a really good service.
Trustee Cirilli?
Jane, you mentioned that you were going out and doing education on identity theft. I had the good fortune of attending a class like that put on by the Jefferson County's DA's office. I don't know if you had any interchange with them. The fellow that put it on was not one of the prosecutors, but and I really was astounded at how helpful and the kind of level of information he put out. It wasn't about protecting yourself on a computer. It was about protecting the kind of identity you carry around in your wallet and not using checks. And so if that's the kind of program that you are putting on, I think if you would be willing, it would be good for our citizens to hear something like that if we could set it up. I was really impressed.
Yeah, we're better than Jeffco.
I
No, we work closely with that office, great office. That's exactly what we're doing, and Jane does a great job.
Does Cynthia Taylor work for you?
Yes, Cindy, who was the Director of Consumer Protection for 25 years, has moved to half-time, is getting ready to retire. She's training Jane and is working with Jane as we transition.
She's done a few classes with me
Yeah.
at Monarch High School on
Oh, yeah.
identity theft prevention. She was great,
Yeah.
so keep that up. It's really valuable.
Good to hear.
Yeah.
Trustee Gregorus?
I just want to thank both of you for your presentation, direct to the point, very informative, and thanks for all your good work. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Trustee Pennington?
Jane, so quickly, we've got millions of viewers watching us on TV right now. So how does one...
Or at least 10.
If you think you've been scammed, or have questions for this community protection unit, how does one make contact with you? Where do you find the phone number, in the phone book or on your Google or whatever?
Yeah, I have cards with me tonight, but the phone number is 303-441-3700. And my email is jwalsh@bouldercounty.org.
I suspect we could put this on our website.
Yeah,
as
that
a
would be very
contact.
And the second question is, do you ever put together a pamphlet, a brochure, or whatnot on, for example, the 5 top ways to avoid ID theft that we might be able to pick up and reproduce in our Sentinel, our monthly newsletter?
We have stacks. I'd be happy to.
Okay.
Thank you.
So I think if you put our town manager on your distribution list, he'll probably see that they get out to all of our residents. And then ditto on Joe's ID theft seminar, I will personally attend. I think that would be a very valuable program.
Love to do that.
Thank you.
We'll leave a few cards with the town manager, and if anybody needs those, we'll be happy to be in touch.
Very good. Thank you so much
Thank
once
you
again.
all very much.
All right. With that brings us to what was 6B, Proclamation for the Youth Corps. And Mr. Magley, do you have somebody from staff who wants to, or do you want to give an introduction?
Martin Phillips, our Parks Director, is going to come up and lead the presentations. But this is a great program for the town. We get lot of work done through this program. Something we've done for years, and I think unless something comes up, we'll continue to do in the future. Mark?
Good evening, Mark Toth, town staff. Every year, a great honor to have several folks from our community who serve as participants in Boulder County's Youth Corps program. And at the end of the season, at the end of the session, when school starts, we like to have the group come back and receive a proclamation from the mayor. And this year's group was no exception. We have a great effort by a bunch of great folks. So we have individual proclamations for each. I'll just read the one whereas describing all the project pieces, and then I'll do the best job I can butchering the names. And receive the proclamations and take a picture with the mayor. We'll make sure you're in the newsletter. It comes out in October. So this year's Boulder County Youth Corps program members participated during their 8-week tour. They worked over 300 hours on a variety of projects throughout the community and learned much about their local environment. Their accomplishments included the installation of 2,100 feet of soft trail between Christensen Avenue and Colton Road, the installation of 710 feet of soft trail at 3 parks. They applied linseed oil to 725 feet of cedar fencing at the 3 Parks Dog Park, and they applied linseed oil to 550 feet of cedar fencing at 3 Parks Bike Park. They also installed erosion control materials and overseeded the social bike trails at Community Park and installed the crushed granite to 275-foot margin near the sidewalk at Williams Field. It was a very busy summer. So if I could, I'd like to invite everybody to come up and receive a proclamation, and if you'll stay up here for a picture, that would be great. Give me on.
Up front.
Christopher Gray. Austin. Julia. John Van. Mallory Franks. Kevin Sherman. It's just the three of them. Okay, and then this year's leaders were Lauren Sherman Dunker and Jack Wright and Judy.
Great. Thanks so much. So, for the record, I'm going to read this proclamation of the Board of Trustees of Town of Superior in appreciation of the Boulder County Youth Corps, whereas Boulder County Youth Corps is commended for their dedicated efforts to help our community become a better place to live, whereas the Town of Superior has supported the Boulder County Youth Corps since 2004 by coordinating necessary parks and open space projects as outlined by Mr. Toth. Now, therefore, I, Andrew Muckle, Mayor of the Town of Superior, and the Board of Trustees do hereby proclaim its appreciation to the Boulder County Youth Corps for their significant contribution to the community. So, with that, thanks so much. Appreciate it. Very much. Thanks a lot. Very much.
One, two, three. Appreciate it. Very good. Thanks so much.
All right. We'll take a brief break in case anybody wants to not stay.
I don't want to leave it.
All right. That brings us to item number 7, the consent agenda, and remaining on the consent agenda is acceptance of the minutes of the Open Space Advisory Committee meeting. And I believe that's it. So entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda by Trustee Skumat, second by Trustee Hansen. Discussion, all in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. That brings us to what was 7B, acceptance of the minutes of the, approval of the minutes of the September 12th, 2011 Board of Trustees meeting. Trustee Williams.
Yeah, and on page 49 on the minutes, it says RCAC looked at the plan and a few things they thought, it should say they thought did not make sense for the plan is slash recycling, required tree slash landscaping to be diverted. Slash means trees that fall down during storms. It was just in the positive and in the negative. Is that correct?
No slash. Right.
Right, yeah.
A typo. Yep.
Okay?
But that changed the meaning, so,
Yep,
yeah.
very good. So with that, I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes with that change by trustee Williams, second by trustee Gregorus. Discussion, all in favor? Approval of the minutes. That brings us to what was 7C, adoption of a resolution approving an investment policy. Trustee Pennington.
Yes, the reason I put this on here is the town's investment policy is very important to assuring its, the soundness of, well, the integrity of our management of our financial reserves. And Paul put together what I thought was a great presentation to the board, and I wanted that to be made on TV to the benefit of the viewing public and to the members in attendance. So, Paul, that's the only reason I pulled it. If you could give a summary to us all of what it is you recommend, the changes you are recommending, and why you're recommending them, and how this benefits the town. Thank you.
Yes, and will we be investing in credit default swaps?
Only if you dictate. Paul Combs, town staff. Trustee Pennington, I'd like to take a few minutes, and I'll try to keep it somewhat brief, as it relates to how we do manage our investment portfolio, ultimately for safety, liquidity, and yield in that particular order. We currently have right now about $40 million, and that's a pretty standard investment amount we have for the town of Superior. Generally, what we're dictated or guided by when we create our investment policy are the Colorado revised statutes, and they're pretty specific as it relates to what municipalities, what public entities essentially can invest their funds in. So we've taken that as a basic framework and extrapolated from that as a general overview. The town is allowed to invest in U.S. government securities and also securities called instrumentalities. It's one level removed of government agencies, but essentially securities and investments secured by the federal government. That is the reason we are looking at a change in our investment policy. The Colorado Revised Statutes identifies that all investments that we make have to receive the highest bond rating. And there are three essential bond rating companies in the United States: Moody's, Fitch, and Standard & Poor's. And as you are well aware, Standard & Poor's recently downgraded U.S. government debt from the highest level of AAA to a very, very high level, but nonetheless one level lower at AA+. Essentially, the Colorado Revised Statutes are very specific that if, in fact, one of these three rating agencies lower the rating of U.S. government debt, anything below AAA, that puts some restrictions on what we can invest in. And it doesn't modify the type of instruments we can invest in, but the percent that we can essentially invest in. So essentially, what this affects us with are investment in what are called U.S. agencies or instrumentalities. Then we invest essentially in four of those. Essentially, they're the Fannie Mae's, Freddie Mac's of the world. Those essentially are government entities essentially that stimulate home building and home loans in the country. Essentially, they buy home loans from local banks, so local banks can then issue additional home loans. So essentially what happens now with instrumentalities or agencies is if in fact now Standard & Poor's has downgraded U.S. debt by one particular level, we are required to invest no more than 50% of our portfolio in instrumentalities. And currently of our $40 million, just coincidentally, we have about 20 million, 50% in instrumentalities. That number fluctuates. It's a very, very safe investment. It fluctuates anywhere, typically up to 60 to 65%. But right now we're restricted, unless the board approves otherwise, to invest no more than 50% collectively in instrumentalities and no more than 5% in one individual instrumentality. As you can see from the summary documents that I provided for you, we have more than 5% investment in three separate instrumentalities. So what staff is asking for the board's consideration this evening is, number one, formal adoption of this investment policy, and then allowing investments collectively in instrumentalities to exceed 50%. We're proposing up to 75%, as well as individual investments in one instrumentality to exceed that 5% threshold up to 30%. There's ramification. If we don't do this, we'll probably generate about half as much interest income as we typically generate. This year, for example, our investment portfolio, we're projecting to return about $400,000. The immediate effect would be to essentially cut that in half. From my professional experience and my colleagues' professional experience, there really is no risk in investing in instrumentalities any more there is in investing in U.S. Treasuries. But there's first and foremost on our mind when we create this particular investment policy, the safety of these particular investments and the liquidity of the investments are number one, and number two, the yield being third. So we don't feel there's any exposure whatever to safety or liquidity. So what we're asking is the board's approval to expand our ability to invest in more than 50% collectively in instrumentalities, more than 5% on an individual basis, ultimately to keep our investment yield at a level we need to keep it at to meet our budget requirements. So I would also be available for any questions.
Very good. Thank you. Trustee Pennington?
So my question is, to the best of your professional judgment, is there any downside to this, and what is it?
There is not. As long as you are under a mindset that the U.S. government is going to meet its financial obligations, starting with U.S. Treasuries, and that perhaps could be argued. There's no risk. We have larger issues, I guess I would say. In fact, there's a concern about the U.S. government meeting its financial obligations. And alternatively, we really don't have an option to put our monies in anything that is of substantial interest-bearing instrument. We have investments in banks and certificates of deposits, but in this particular market, the yields are very, very low on those particular investments. So, long answer to a good question, no risk, or very, very limited risk.
So you're guaranteeing the U.S. will not go bankrupt, is what you're saying?
I'm not saying that.
Trustee Skumats.
And my only comment is that I trust your judgment. I do worry about I worry more about the principal than much interest in this time. So if we were having our interest but we're completely secure, that wouldn't make me nervous at all. But I'll defer to your expertise on this. That's, I guess, the way I feel.
Trustee Hansen.
I'm risk averse.
Just to be clear, this isn't staff's decision only. You work with your financial advisor, the town's financial advisor, right?
Trustee Hansen, that's a good point. For part of the town's portfolio, we do deal with a financial advisor, and they are essentially clients for hundreds of local governments, districts, municipalities, and essentially invest their funds, and we are one of their particular clients. I trust they do this for a living, exclusively for a living. I trust their professional guidance, and it is in consultation with them that we recommend this. Yes.
And we've been with the same firm for some time.
That is correct, for 7 years, I believe.
Any other questions, public comment regarding this issue? Seeing none, I'll entertain a motion. Trustee Gregorius?
Oh, I don't have any time.
Oh. Well, you're recommending to approve the resolution R-32, a resolution of the Board of Trustees of the Town of Superior approving an investment policy for the town. Is that the one?
I am indeed.
Okay. Second by Trustee Skumats. Further discussion? All in favor? Unanimous. Thank you very much. That brings us to item number 8, adoption of a resolution approving an amended and restated intergovernmental agreement with Boulder County regarding the management of the Hudson-Harris Reservoir. Mr. Meglin.
Thank you, Mayor. Tonight, Martin Toth, our Parks Recreation Open Space Director, and I'm pleased that Ron Stewart with the county is here tonight. They're going to give a presentation on the recommended improvements to the Hudson-Harris Reservoir, and we've got a draft IGA, or final IGA, for the board's consideration and approval. Martin.
Great, thanks very much.
Good evening. My name is Ernst Striga. I'm a natural resource planner with Boulder County Parks and Open Space. And I'm here to kind of give you some background information, a little bit of timeline, some of the alternatives that we looked at, as well as our working group, Hudson-Harris Reservoir Working Group, and our recommended plan to you. So Hutchin Harris Reservoir, as many of you probably know, is located near the intersection of 88th Street and Highway 36. It is county-owned property. Located right here. It gets its water, well, its primary purpose is to store irrigation water for Carolyn Holmberg Preserve at Rock Creek Farm, which is another county-owned property a little further downstream. The water for Hutchin Harris Reservoir comes from the Farmers Reservoir and Irrigation Company shares that we own that is diverted off of South Boulder Creek via the community ditch, as well as the drainage within the basin above the reservoir. The water is then manually discharged at the outlet down here into an unnamed tributary that goes into Rock Creek and is eventually used at the Carolyn Holmberg Preserve at Rock Creek Farm to irrigate crops. It's a little hard to see here, the property boundary. It kind of follows the shape of the reservoir. It's approximately 18.8 acres in size. Its maximum decreed water storage is 119 acre-feet when it's in full use. The primary decreed use for the water that's stored in there is for agricultural purposes. We'll get into the timeline of those decrees in just a little bit. The reservoir has a dam that's an earthen embankment and has a material called lignite that's in it. It's kind of a material that's, I guess it's a soft coal that's a state between peat and hard coal, and that's kind of been part of the cause of a lot of the problems that the reservoir has had over the years. The dam is classified as jurisdictional by the state engineer's office, and because it meets certain criteria, including the spillway is greater than 10 feet high, and the reservoir holds up more than 100 acre-feet of water. So now I'd like to go through a little bit of a timeline of the reservoir's past. It was originally constructed in 1882. At that time, it was constructed for 44 acre-feet of water storage, and which was decreed for agricultural purposes. In 1906, the reservoir was enlarged to 75 by 75 acre-feet to give the total of 119 acre-feet, again decreed for agricultural use. The county purchased Rock Creek Farm in around 1979, and then in 1995 is when we got our first notification from the state engineer dam inspector regarding the condition of the dam, and issued the first restriction for the dam, which was a storage restriction of 6 feet below the crest of the dam, allowing for approximately 64 acre-feet of water in the reservoir. Some of the issues included seepage problems at the toe of the embankment, outlet works in poor conditions, inadequate crest width by current standards, which is kind of the top of the dam, though it's too narrow at this point. Sustained wave erosion has occurred on the upstream slope, and finally some of the riprap needed to be supplemented to control some of the original problems. 2001, the county didn't do anything during that time. The dam inspector came out again, found the same conditions, but allowed the continued restricted storage of about 64 acre-feet. At that time, the county hired an engineer to complete an alternatives analysis and to provide us with cost estimates to see how much it would cost to rehabilitate the dam. In 2008, a sinkhole was discovered on the downstream slope by the dam inspector and issued a warning that if no plans were in place by mid-2010 that there would be a zero storage restriction placed on the reservoir. And that's what happened. Again, the county decided that we did not want to do any rehabilitation during that time, and so we got a zero storage restriction on the reservoir in the summer of 2010. At that time then, once we drained the reservoir, a number of residents in the town of Superior were concerned about the draining, both from a wildlife perspective, but also from the aesthetics of a drained reservoir. After kind of hearing those concerns, we worked with the state dam engineer or dam inspector to allow temporary storage of about 30 to 35 acre-feet of water in the reservoir, and that's what's in there right now. So it's about half of what was there for the past 15 years. They allowed that as well, as we kind of came up with a long-term strategy for the reservoir. In the beginning of this year, 2011, we hired the same engineer who now works for a different firm, but the same engineer who had done the 2001 analysis to kind of go back and look at the alternatives again and to provide us with updated cost estimates. And we also added another alternative to this analysis, which I'll talk about in just a little bit. And also, earlier this year, we convened the Hodgson-Harris Reservoir Working Group. Talk about that in just a little bit. So here's the alternatives that were analyzed. The no action alternative really is for comparison only. What it's showing is that this is what it's been since 1995 at 64 acre feet for approximately 11 acres of open water. The zero, of course, is at the zero storage restriction. Just kind of gives you a comparison of what the depths were and so forth with that without doing anything what's been to date. It's for comparison only because the state engineer is going to require us to do something, either fix the problem or keep it at zero storage. So the other alternatives that our engineer looked at were to breach the dam and reclaim the land. This would be getting rid of the reservoir altogether, restoring the natural drainage across the property, and not having the water storage at the site. The estimated construction cost for that is $335,000. And then there's an estimated construction-related cost, which is the design work, permitting, any reviews that may be necessary. So that's a percentage of the estimated construction cost estimate. So the total of alternative 2 is $385,000. The next alternative is to bring the reservoir to a non-jurisdictional level. And what that would mean is that then the state engineer wouldn't be on the radar. They wouldn't be inspecting it. We'd be allowed to keep some storage in the reservoir, but we couldn't bring it up to the full 119 acre feet. For that, I mean, this is kind of the number that we're looking at there. It's bringing it up to a maximum of 10 feet. Again, if you remember the jurisdictional level, everything above 10 feet is jurisdictional. So because this is below 10 feet and less than 100 acre feet, therefore it's non-jurisdictional. So we have about 35 acre feet maximum, and that would be when it was completely full. Of course, this water is decreed for agriculture, so that water would be taken off during the growing season. Estimated construction cost there is $230,000. Construction-related costs are about $35,000, and so the total is about $264,000. Some of the things that would need to be completed with the non-jurisdictional level would be that there'd be a new emergency spillway constructed. We need to do some stabilization of the spillway channel, replace the outlet structures, do some embankment regrading, and then revegetating all the disturbed sites that were disturbed during the construction work.
How many acre feet are in it right now?
Currently, there's about that much. We're
About
right at
35?
about the non-jurisdictional level right now. The next alternative is full dam restoration. This is bringing it back up to its historic value of 119 acre feet, which is the decreed amount for the reservoir. This alternative includes removing that lignite material from approximately, the engineer is estimating that's probably in about half the dam, so pretty much we have to at least take half the dam away, bring new materials in to replace that. In addition, we do some regrading on the remainder of the embankment, bringing, for example, the width of the, what do you call it, the crest, the top of the dam, making sure that meets this current standards. Replacing the outlet structure, reconstructing the emergency spillway again, stabilizing the spillway channel, and revegetating again of the disturbed sites. Estimated construction cost is about $840,000, and that's including all that earthwork, all that moving of materials on the site. The estimated construction-related costs are about $378,000. The percentage here, again, this is a percentage of the estimated construction cost. The percentage used here is greater, and I think it's about 40% that we used on this number, as opposed to, I think it was around 20% on that. This is greater because there's going to be more scrutiny on the design, the review, permitting, etc., by the state engineers and others. So there's more that needs to go into those pieces of the puzzle. So the estimated total cost would be about $1.2 million. As I mentioned before, we added another alternative to this analysis, and that was to say, what if we just did a partial dam rehabilitation, maybe didn't bring it up completely to the 119 acre feet, but brought it, put more than 35 acre feet in there, somewhere in the middle. And what we found with that from our engineers' estimates is that it's really not saving us that much money. It's about $1 million to do that. And primarily that's because if it's going to be jurisdictional, we have to take care of this lignite problem, which means we have to take out a good chunk of the current dam. So as I mentioned, we convened a working group of a number of citizens and others, staff, etc. And I'll show you a list of all those members at the end of the slideshow. But the purpose of this working group was to help Parks and Open Space determine the best solution for the long-term management of the reservoir and to explore potential project partnerships. And our goal is to find a long-term solution for the reservoir that meets the interests of the working group members while being fiscally responsible and meeting the water needs at Carolyn Holmberg Preserve at Rock Creek Farm. And also, I should put in there that it also has to meet the requirements of Colorado water law and what our decrees for the water is. So we had 4 meetings with the working group between February and August. Some of the things that we talked about were the interest of the various working group members, as well as various opportunities and constraints for the site. One of the main constraints is Colorado water law and what we can do with the water, where we can move it, how we can store it, etc. Some of the other interests are, the ability to store water in the reservoir by our agricultural tenant that works at Carolyn Holmberg Preserve at Rock Creek Farm, be able to store that water and have it so that he can use it when he needs it later in the growing season when water may not be available otherwise. Using that for agricultural production. Wildlife habitat in the wetlands around the reservoir were important to many working group members, and in particular some of the migratory birds that use the site, some of the nesting shorebirds that use the site we talked a lot about. The site also provides aesthetics for a number of the neighbors and a buffer for the town in the surrounding area, as well as a gateway kind of on Highway 36. There are some potential recreational opportunities, and we'll talk about that in just a little bit, as well as connections for trails and so forth, but we'll talk about that in just a little bit. And then finally, fiscal prudence, wanting to make sure that whatever we're proposing is done prudent about how we're spending the taxpayer dollars. So at the final meeting, the working group did recommend the full dam rehabilitation with a partnership between the town and county, which I'll talk about. As part of the intergovernmental agreement that you have been able to review. So what the intergovernmental agreement states is that we would go for full dam rehabilitation, that alternative 4, at a cost of approximately $1.2 million. The county and town, based on our mutual interest in the property, would split the design and construction cost 50-50. The site would remain county-owned and operated. We'd keep a minimum of 40 acre feet in the reservoirs at all times to the extent possible. There may be times when, extreme droughts, when the water's just not there, we can't, there's nothing we can do about that. But our goal is to keep a minimum of 40 acre feet in the reservoir at all times for the wildlife values that it provides, as well as the aesthetic benefits of keeping water in the reservoir. And kind of to match that 50-50 split, as well as to kind of help offset keeping some of that water in the reservoir, the town would supply 20 acre feet of water annually. This would primarily be a direct flow to the farm because the town's water, my understanding, is not decreed for storage in the reservoir, so we can't keep it in there for more than 72 hours. So the best way would be to bring it straight to the farm and use it that way. The reservoir would be filled to its decreed capacity of 119 acre feet when possible. Again, that's based on water availability, drought conditions. There may also be times when we have nesting birds along the reservoir when we may not want to fill the reservoir at that time, so that may limit our ability to do so. What we do when we put this in the IGA is that all water will ultimately be used for agriculture, which is its decreed use, and that's kind of so that we don't lose the water rights sometime in the future. We want to make sure that we're using it as it's decreed. That would include the 40 acre feet that I just talked about, that minimum amount, and how we would work that is just making sure that as we are pulling that water out, we're getting water back in. So it's kind of like cycling it through. In terms of if there's any management issues that come up, the IGA talks about the town and county just working collaboratively on any of those issues. And then finally, we talked as a working group about recreational facilities at the site, whether we'd have trails around the reservoir or on the reservoir, have recreational facilities on the reservoir, boating, etc. But I think the consensus with the working group was that that we're trying to protect the wildlife values, and that if we have trails, it's a relatively small site, and so if we're having trails and people and dogs on the reservoir, we're going to scare away that wildlife, and so that values are going to be lost. So what we are proposing is recreational facilities near the intersection, or at the intersection of 88th Street and Shamrock, if that's desired by either the town and county. And we have, I think it's Exhibit A in the IGA, shows a area that's both on town and county property where we could potentially put some type of recreational facility, such as a bird blind, maybe some interpretive signs about the wildlife and the water use at the reservoir. So we're looking for approval of the intergovernmental agreement between the town of Superior and Boulder County for full rehabilitation of the reservoir with a 50-50 cost share. And to conclude, these are all the members of the working group, some of the local residents, as well as members from ProStack and POSAC and OSAC, Boulder County Audubon, our tenants on the site, town of Superior staff, and then Boulder County Parks and Open Space staff that were also on site. So, I can take any questions.
Questions from the board? Trustee Hansen?
The 20 acre feet of water, so currently the water goes to the Rock Creek Farm. Do they pay for that water? So when it goes to there for pumpkins or whatever it's for, do they pay for it?
We own the water, so we purchase the water.
Okay. So Superior, you're asking Superior to provide 20 acre feet a year, and we would give that to you. So we pay for it. What does 20 feet of water cost us?
$10,000.
So $10,000 a year. Okay.
Per share.
For sure, Franco, and
Right.
any idea how much a share is?
Huh?
No. How much?
No.
How many acres?
How many acres is in a share?
Of one. Part to the town staff. The water that would be used for the town's contribution would be shares of the FRICO portfolio the town has, and those shares are at 1 acre foot, is my understanding. So a good general price for a share of water on average over the course of the year would be about $10,000. So for 20 shares, $200,000, one-time investment.
For one-time investment or annual investment?
If it was a use that was always going to happen, it would be a one-time contribution or a one-time change to the town's water system.
So we pay it one time, we own the shares, and then from here on, it supplies that 20 acre feet every single year with no additional cost.
Well, we
No.
we own shares. We own shares of Franco.
We already have those shares, and we either store them, or if we don't store them, we try to lease them to farmers. And if we're not able to lease them, then we're required to release it downstream.
Oh, so it's not costing us any additional money then, is what you're saying?
No, those are shares we already have. Right.
Okay.
What revenue do we usually get when we lease them?
Not much. I don't remember.
My understanding is there's usually a couple of leases a year, and it's not for much money. It's in the tens of thousands of dollars.
Yeah, I was going to say about $25,000 a year is what our lease revenue is.
Just curious what they ordered by you too.
Right. Yeah.
So, follow up this use, this 20 acre feet going to the reservoir or the farm is consistent with the use that is either supposed to be used by us or the next use after us?
Right. Yeah, I mean, why we typically try to lease the water is because we don't have the storage. I mean, we store the CBT in Lindy Gap first. So we try to lease that water and get some revenue off it before we release it downstream if we can.
Justice Gomez?
And we're obligated in a low water year as well as a high?
No. There's actually a provision in the IGA that if, in a severe drought, if the water's not available, then we would use it for our purposes first.
Matt, can you refer to that section of the IGA? I'm having trouble finding it.
Just while you're looking at that, so the amount of revenue we generate off of an agricultural lease depends on the drought year and whether or not we're leasing any or not. You know, in a wet year, we don't lease any water. It looks like, if I'm reading this correctly from the budget, there's, kind of the peak year was in 2008, which we got $15,000 off of it.
It's in...
And it's gone down from there.
Okay.
5D.
Other questions from board? Trustee Gross?
Not necessarily a question. This is a significant capital expenditure, right? Even though it's a 50-50 split with Boulder County, it's roughly around $600,000 for the town of Superior. On the other hand, I think having a complete reservoir rehabilitation is going to, I think, bless multiple generations to come. And I think if we're looking at long-term, I think it's worth the investment. It's a lot of money for there, but it's worth the investment, not just for those that are living in Saddlebrook, but for everybody in Superior. So I would certainly be in favor of this. I think it's a great, once again, collaboration with Boulder County. We've been very successful with Boulder County before in other projects, and this is one of them. So congratulations on that good work that you have done. Thank you.
Other
Staff
questions?
and everybody else that's been involved.
Other questions from the board, and then we'll have public comment. Trustees comments?
Yeah, did you say 5B? Let's
5D.
D is in dog.
D like dog. Because the one above said when requested by the county, but it doesn't.
Right. Yeah.
But it doesn't say, who determines whether it's available or not? I'm a little worried about that language.
Right.
Well,
I second that.
as you recall from our presentation by our water attorney, Paul Zilas, he's reviewed the IGA, and he's comfortable that the language protects the town.
Is there any downside, however, to say the reservoir will be filled to the maximum decree capacity when Superior deems it has sufficient water to supply such?
Okay.
Yes.
We're okay with adding language like that. So when, just kind of the same way that we have for the 40 acre feet of, to the extent reasonably possible and feasible.
Right, because the county might have the same issue.
Right, exactly.
I'd like
Again,
that.
extreme drought here,
Yeah.
same thing for us. We
Yeah.
can't store the 40 acres because of drought, and we
Right.
can definitely add that for the IGA.
Right.
And I was going to suggest under 5B that we added into the language there.
Right.
It just lends itself quite well there, saying, 20 acre feet of raw water, so long as the town's water portfolio is available without compromising the town's water supply.
Well,
Kendra is
Something
looking,
that-
you're looking askance.
Well, she,
I'm not a water lawyer.
Yeah,
The
so-
problem is we start
Yeah.
making changes to this without.
Right, so,
because I was here, I can't
yeah,
say
fair
one way or
enough.
the other.
Yeah, fair
I
enough.
think we can just discuss it with him, however, but I think we have to retain control as to when we declare we have enough water to meet this 20
well,
acre feet.
before you can
I think we have, let's not try to craft an IGA on the fly, if that's
I
okay.
agree.
So I think we all kind of know where we're going with that one, so if maybe staff can work on it, we could come back as a consent agenda item sometime. Trustee Pennington?
I have two issues. One, this is asking for a commitment for the town to half of the $1.2 million at this point. However, somewhere in this, it referred to cost overruns, et cetera. I would like to suggest that we add language that fixes our outlay at $600,000 and doesn't open us up to the cost outlays. I'm really uncomfortable with that intangible of what those overruns might be.
There's, I think there's language in there there's language in there that says the IGA cannot be modified without consent of the two agencies.
Over the
Cost share.
1.2 million.
Right.
It does say that.
Yeah, it's under section 4, it says that
Right.
we've agreed to share equally in costs up to that amount. It can't go higher than
Right.
that without your consent.
Well, it says if estimates are projected to exceed this amount, any amendment must be in writing signed by both parties. But that still leaves the intangible out there of what will Superior do if, for example, this ends up costing $2 million. So rather than put this project at risk, if and when that might happen, I would like us to make that commitment totally finite right now, that our commitment to this project is $600,000. I don't want it to come back to us at some point and say, will you add another 100,000? Will you add another 150? Will you add another 200? At this point, I think we need to have some certainty as to what we're agreeing to, because if this project can go ahead with that commitment from both parties, I'm all for it. But it's a whole different ball of wax to me if when we put pedal to the metal, it's $2 million or something that is quite a bit more than this. Just, that's my view on it.
Trustee Williams?
And so I wanted to find out about operating and maintenance costs of the reservoir and the land. Is that the responsibility of Boulder County, or is that the responsibility of the town? And is there language?
I'm sorry,
in
just
here saying-
for those on the record, there was a finger pointing at the Director of Parks and Open Space saying that it was on the county's dime.
And so I just wanted to make sure that there's some language in this IGA that states that.
It just says they have ownership, that's all I like.
That's all I could find in there as well.
I think it needs to declare.
Well, if it says ownership, that means that unless there's something in there that says that we're responsible for something, that we're not responsible then. My guess is once again, I want to make sure we take public comment. My guess is that if the cost estimate came in at $2 million, we'll have heartburn. The county's probably not going to say, yeah, we'll spend $1.4 million, so we'll have to have that conversation again anyway.
Yeah, the county will bid out the project through a competitive bid. When those bids come in, we'll have an idea what the project's going to cost. And if it comes in at $2 million, then before any money's spent, we're going to have a discussion about.
Right.
Well, I'm saying my point.
not like
My
we're gonna
point of
start-
view is that committing to half of a $1.2 million project is quite substantial, and I'm certainly hoping it can be accomplished for that. And I'm willing to put limits on what it is this town's willing to spend, and that is $600,000. If I'm in the minority, I'm in the minority. I accept that.
Okay, other board questions? Trustee Skumatz?
So it talks about the recreational facilities, and we're talking about a fair bit of change here, and the ownership and access is the county's. The only possibility for us to have access, besides view access, I guess, is this number 7, the recreational facilities. How many square feet are we talking about? What's the size of this intersection? You know, I wasn't quite clear on that. What kind of access do we have, really?
It's a bird watching deck.
And we would have to spend the money to build
Yeah,
it
we would.
ourselves.
The town.
I'm
would
just
spend
asking
money
what
for that,
what
yeah.
the land is that we're
Do
talking
you know
about.
how
How
much
big?
land that is, Martin?
Is it half the size of this room? Is it a tenth the size of this room? What, yeah, a corner is a,
Well, if it's.
how do we interpret a corner?
So if you think about the intersection of 88th and Shamrock, there is a landscaped area with turf grass, and then some trees, and then you see the fence line where Boulder County's property starts. So it would be in that area through there that could be reshaped to include a bird line and some interpretive signs, like we heard Ernst refer to earlier, that would make sense. So it could be the size of this room, but it would need to have probably some soft surface trail access to make it easy for folks to get to from the intersection.
It's
So
about
that's
300. It's about 300 feet by 100 feet.
Oh, okay. Thanks.
Trustee Pennington?
Along that same line, because another issue I have is public access to this improvement. It's a huge cost outlay. coming from our open space fund, and it isn't open to the majority of the community, as I understand it. So please correct me if I'm wrong. You have to go through Saddlebrook's gates to get to it, right? I have all the people telling me I'm wrong. So Martin, could you correct me? How do I, if I want to go and enjoy this property, how do I get to it?
You can only go in the corner, you can't walk around.
You can't walk around.
You can only go in this corner I've been asking about.
Right.
This wouldn't be an active area, this would be a passive property.
Right, but how do I enjoy it passively?
You go to the bird blind, or you traverse the area around, because you don't actually go on to the property.
But how do I traverse the area around
You
it?
can
Where
get
do
there.
I get access?
From that corner, along
Only the
gate,
corner.
or
And I-
along-
No direct access onto the property.
Yeah, right.
Only the corner.
Only the corner. Is there any, who owns that? Does the Zaharias property is contiguous to it, correct?
Correct.
And who owns that? Is it still Zaharias
Correct.
Trust or whatever?
Yes.
Has anybody explored whether or not we can buy a right-of-way or a access path, and how much that would cost to allow all of our residents public access to a broader portion of this?
If I may, so, and you can answer too, so if and when the Zaharias property ever becomes developed, that would be an agreement that we would work out with them. That, essentially they would be on the border of the county property, but would be on the Zaharias property, and we would require that presumably if it's part of the development.
Yeah. I think that's great, but can it be explored whether or not? It doesn't seem like it would take that much acreage to assure some sort of path that residents can get broader participation, and enjoyment out of this project.
The board's direction to me with regard to that was that would be explored when the development came forward.
When the development of what?
The Zahari property.
Zaharias. So we've not pursued that. Would that, at this point, we've not pursued any sort of right-of-way or easement or anything around it?
No.
Is it worth, for me, it would be worth pursuing to see whether or not we can get broader access. Zaharias may or may not materialize for the next 20 years. And I've actually gone around this with English, and it's a beautiful property. And I'd sort of like to be able to sort of legally enjoy it without sneaking through the gates, So,
Not that you
so
ever did.
I'm just trying to figure out how we can get broader community enjoyment of this.
So just to interject a little bit of information on this, I think when we first started talking about this, when the Boulder County staff members got together with the Public Works Director, and I talked about different levels of access, and if a partial parcel acquisition was to potentially be pursued, that would increase the level of activity in the area and potentially have some negative impacts on the amount and quality of the wildlife there. And I don't think that's necessarily going to get us to that.
Yeah, I think the quality of wildlife actually supersedes, we can view it from afar, but if we have too many people walking around, there's not going to be any wildlife for us to see.
Exactly.
So that's the whole point.
So maybe I can, unless
No,
there's
I think
burning
there's a ballot.
questions from the board right now, maybe if there's any public comment, we can take that right now.
Just one more question about the non-jurisdictional option. Martin, in the working group, how come that option wasn't chosen? Just because it wasn't enough water? Or can you elaborate a little bit more?
I think the unanimous conclusion of everybody on the working group is that the full restoration provided the most benefits overall. That something less than that wouldn't get at what everybody's goals were. I think the interests of all parties were best achieved by having the full dam restoration. Something less than that would be less than optimal solution.
I would agree that having full restoration is ideal, and that would be great. But I'm anxious to hear from the public if they really truly think that spending $600,000 from the town of Superior towards that is worth it. And maybe we revisit the non-jurisdictional option. So,
okay.
And would the footprint for that be like a third of the footprint of
what it is
full
now.
water?
What it is now.
I know.
As mentioned now, the picture that you saw of where it's at would be what it would look like forever.
And that's about a third of the picture, the full picture?
Yeah, 35 out of the 180
2019.
No, but depth is different from width and all that, so that's why I'm asking about the footprint of the water.
Trustee Williams and
It's
Trustee
different from that
DeGrosse.
volume.
Can I add something to Trustee Hansen's comment about the non-jurisdictional? As I understood it, there would not be a continuous flow of water. I mean, there'd be times when there'd be none, and there'd be times when there would be, a few acre feet, and then 10 acre feet, and that would be the most. So if you saw recently when it was lower, when the water levels were lower, that it would be the highest that it could be at a non-jurisdictional level. And I think that I believe, I don't know, maybe someone from the public can also
But the
collaborate
highest
that.
level it can be is
And
not-
actually, Ron Stewart could.
Is the highest level it can be at non-jurisdictional is 35 acre feet, and that's what it's at now.
And I was thinking of, I'm sorry, I got my terms mixed up, but it was feet deep, acre feet deep.
10 feet deep.
10 feet deep,
Right.
sorry.
35 acre feet, 10 feet deep.
Yes. Mr. Stewart, yes. You can make bigger comments. You have to have small comments. Welcome. Thank you for coming.
Thanks,
Thank you.
Ron Stewart, Parks and Open Space Director. Maybe to just answer a few of the questions you just had, as well as make a few comments. If you look at, there was one slide in the presentation that showed alternatives and not only how many acre feet would be in the reservoir, but what the number of acres that would be covered by water would be in it. At the non-jurisdictional, you have about a 5-acre lake at its top, and with full restoration, you have about a 13 acres. So that gives some demonstration of how much more water you're going to have at the surface when you have a larger acre-foot storage capacity. I think the other thing about the non-jurisdictional reservoir is that given the fact that this water is essential for the agricultural operation of Rock Creek Farm, if you only have a little water in the reservoir, 35 acre feet, it's going to be more likely to be no water in the reservoir or only a tiny bit of water in the reservoir than if you have a larger storage capacity, because the water will need to be taken out of the reservoir, some of it at least, in order to do the agricultural operation on Rock Creek Farm. So let's just say if you've got 35 acre feet, you need to irrigate the roughly, is it 100 acres that they, roughly 100 acres that they irrigate with this reservoir on Rock Creek Farm. You might take 30 acres out of an acre feet in an irrigation, in one irrigation, meaning the reservoir is going to have almost nothing left. Whereas if you do something that's higher, closer to the full dam restoration, you can pull that 35 acre feet out of maybe the 90 or 95 that are there, and you're still going to have a fairly significant reservoir after the agricultural water has been pulled out. So I'd say that just operationally would be kind of the difference. I also want to make clear that the county has every intention of operating this over the lifetime of the reservoir, and I think it would be good when we're looking at your 20 acre feet that you might be committing to this to say that only occurs in years when we're storing the 40 acre feet that we hope to have as a reservoir. And if we can't do that because of a drought, neither you nor we will be able to do it. So, Lisa, did you have
you were talking about they might draw 35 feet, and if we've only got 35 acre feet, then it could drop down to 0. If we're storing 114 or whatever it is, I forget, 119, can they draw 119 as agricultural use? It's not limited to 35. It's limited to, is deemed allowable up to 119?
Except that we're setting the 40 acre foot minimum pool requirement in the IGA. So we would be sure that the tenant did not manage it in that way. So really, the minimum in the full restoration scenario is more than the maximum in the non-jurisdictional scenario.
Trustee Pennington, Trustee DeGrosse.
So Ron, when you fill it totally full, I'm thinking of a bathtub up to the top, right? To me, how I interpreted the explanation given me when I was out there is that the shorebirds and the wildlife and the richness of the whole place came from having that shore and having the overrun into the marsh, et cetera, et cetera. If we fill it brim to brim, do we actually get rid of the shore and thereby some of that wildlife, et cetera?
No, I think Ernst can show you that. No, I think we'd still have the shore. And if we have a nesting bird that's down lower than filling it at 119 feet could allow, we won't fill it to 119 feet while the nesting bird is there.
So you anticipate that active management, that before you add the water, somebody's going to go scope it out, see who's nesting, see who's not nesting, and then you'll make your decision based on the wildlife, the birds,
But
et
a
cetera.
web counter can all be.
I think they're probably required to do that.
So, Trustee Gregorius, and then if we could have public comment, that would be fantastic.
So I think as elected officials, there's a fine balance between, we're elected to show some kind of fiscal responsibility when it comes to things like these. When the alternative first came up several months ago, when we saw the full restoration at $1.2 million, we gasped. It's a lot of money, right? But the collaboration with Boulder County in splitting it 50-50 makes this, I think tenable, makes this doable. And I don't think partial restoration is the answer. I think full restoration is the answer, right? And I would like to hear from the residents now to see what's your feedback for us at this time. If you don't mind.
Okay, sounds like a good idea. So why don't we have some public comment? Anybody who'd like to speak to this issue?
I just wondered if...
You have to come up
to the
to
mic.
hit the mic,
I
sorry.
have to go upstairs?
You have to, yeah.
Sorry.
Name again.
I'm sorry. I just wanted to know, I don't think it was fully...
I'm sorry.
Oh, your name
again.
and address and all that.
All right. My name, again, is Brent Bickel,
Thank you.
862 El Dorado Drive.
Perfect.
Okay. I just don't fully understand. Since Rock Creek Farm is not in the town of Superior, and the water is for Rock Creek Farm, and since we can't use the water we have for drinking, can we use it for agricultural use? Can we use it to water our grass?
Yes, we use FRICO water for raw water for irrigation.
I guess the only thing I don't understand is what's in it for the town? What are we getting for our $600,000? Especially since we can't even use the land as a park or anything else.
Fantastic question. So maybe anybody in the public would like to speak to that. Anybody? Surely there's somebody who wants to speak to this.
Sharon Tedeschi, 2070 Shamrock Drive, Superior. I've been working, and I'll just look for history for everyone to know.
Into the mic.
Can you
You have to get closer to the mic.
I've been just appointed to the OSAC committee. I've also been working with both Boulder County and the town for a year now to help with the preservation of this reservoir. We believe not only for Saddlebrook, which does border it, you see on about a third, a little greater than a third of the outer edge of the reservoir. There is access from 88th Street as well as the Zaharis property, and also from 36. It's an open corridor as you come into the town and leave the town. I think it's an important aesthetic view. We also see it coming in from the ConocoPhillips side, which I'm not sure if that's Louisville or partially Superior.
Louisville.
But there's aesthetic views there, and I think that working with the town of Louisville on trails and interconnects will be important. So I think that there are a lot of benefits long-term. As you've mentioned, I think we don't want to be too short-sighted to lose the water rights that are associated, or the county's water rights that are associated with this reservoir. But the wildlife, which I've sent slideshows multiple times to all of you and to the county commissioners as well. It's a source of wildlife for burrowing owls, for the American avocet, for blue teals, some of the things that are listed on the endangered lists here in Boulder. So I think we have to look bigger picture, not narrowly at the cost per se. We need to look at that cost over what the benefits that we'll get over years to come. So if there's any other questions.
Great.
Thanks.
Thank you. Additional public comment regarding this? Anybody?
John, you move closer to the mic. Are you going to get up?
Hello, Mark Marcoux, 2049 Eagle Avenue. Thank you for taking up this issue. I think it's really important that you act on this. It's really a gem of our town. The density and the diversity of the wildlife here is spectacular. It's amazing when there's water in this reservoir. When it's dry, it's a dust bowl. It's bad for our property values. It's bad for the town as a whole. This is a rallying point for our community, not just for Saddlebrook, for Superior. And if you've been to any of the Boulder County meetings, Boulder County's realizing that they have a gem here as well. So I think you guys have a tremendous opportunity to really make this happen for the people, for the town, for the long term.
Great, thanks.
Thank you.
Anybody else who would like to speak to this issue?
George Kuffner, Superior, Colorado. I got one question. In the last 50, 60 years, we've had water in that that belonged to the county, and they supplied the water in it. I think they're looking for a free handout. I don't think the town has any benefits to it whatsoever because it's not annexed into the town. We're spending our tax money that we've voted for open space purchases on repairing a dam. What's happened the last 25 years is they didn't put no money into this. This should have been maintained years and years. In fact, there used to be fish in that lake at one time. So it deteriorated. The county should have kept up with it at that time. I don't think it's fair to ask the residents to support this. I think the county should support it, period. I paid county taxes just like everybody else does. And they're looking for money because people like to see the view, wildlife. That's very true, but we've had it there for 50 years before it went dry. They didn't put the water back in it.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else like to speak to this? Yep. Come on down.
Dana D'Souza, 1752 Eldorado Drive. I just wanted to mention that as in your notes that you accepted from OSAC, that OSAC has been looking at this for quite a while, and we've gone over a lot of the different issues that have been brought up this evening, and we did vote unanimously to approve and advise, hopefully, that the board will accept this IGA. There's a lot of issues here as far as what George Kuffner brought up, and the county does have the obligation to fulfill it to a certain level. However, I think most of the residents of town have been able to enjoy it at a higher level than what the county really has to. So we would be getting the benefit not only aesthetically, and there are a lot of areas. That viewing area is actually fairly large. We've discussed that in Open Space Committee as far as how much viewing that would be available, what type of things that we could put that wouldn't disturb the wildlife, but that would allow people access to it. It is bordered on the side of Zahari's property, which is also one of the properties on the open space list. And also, as was brought up earlier, there are other ways that we could allow public viewing if that property is developed instead of purchased for open space. So I think there are a lot of reasons other than just the obligations of the county that it would benefit the residents of the community, not just of Saddlebrook, to have it filled up to the proposed level.
Great, Dean, thanks
I have
very
a
much.
clarification question.
Trustee Skometz and then Trustee Hansen.
You mentioned something about the obligation of the county, and it lists breach dam and reclaimed land, so they could potentially just, I mean, when this first came up, it was clear that it seemed that the county was not interested in having much of any water in there, or wasn't willing to spend the money for that until this group got together to try to do something about it. But one of the options here is breach dam and reclaim land, so is that a legal option? It could end up being nothing?
Well, I don't know as far as nothing, but I think they have an obligation, and there's a lot of other people who probably speak to
Yeah,
that
sure, I'm not trying to bring you on the spot.
They have the obligation to provide the water, a certain amount of water for Rock Creek Farms. And so if Rock Creek Farms draws all that water in there, like they said, it would just be nothing, as it has been before the last year or so that we've seen that. So So at certain times, it could be nothing when they would draw all the water, if they only brought it up to what I believe is the 10 feet, not acre feet, but the 10-foot level. So I think they have an obligation to provide the water for the farms, but nothing else, and so at times it could be dry. So, and when that's happened, I think there's been a noticeable difference in the wildlife. And again, that wildlife doesn't only stay in that particular area. I mean, that's something that residents who are on that side of town specifically, we see them flying all over and going to the different ponds and everything as well. So it is a greater area that's affected.
Trustee Hanson?
Dana, did we ever discuss with the county like a 70-30 split or ownership split or anything like that?
That would be something that you can talk to the working group about, I think, who can answer that more. There's been quite a few different proposals that went forward, but I don't think the ownership split has ever been brought forward. I mean, I think it's been discussed, but I don't think it's ever been brought forward at a different level, since it is the county's property.
Additional public comment?
There, John Nybarger, 1514 Bulldona Way. Thank you. So I have a few things to add on this. The first is this also came before POSAC, Parks and Open Space Advisory Committee, to the County Commissioners last week, and it was approved unanimously by them as well. I wanted to quickly just read something from the sustainability report that for the sustainable agriculture review that's going on with the county, and this has to do with water. And in 2050, the South Platte Basin is projected to have a municipal and industrial water supply gap of 58%. So 58% in less than 40 years. Consequently, water storage and management will become increasingly more important as the timing of snowmelt and irrigation water demand change. So the ability for us as being part of the county to be involved with helping to manage the issues of reduced precipitation and climate change, I think this is a really a great way to help be involved with that and help out our local farmers. The other thing I wanted to just go through really quickly were just some of the pictures to remind you, if you will, of a little bit about why we care about this. This is a gateway to Superior and Louisville and Boulder County. It was the first thing a lot of people see when they get into Superior. There's the wildlife and wetlands. There were potential trail connections that we were talking about. This was before the working group had met, so some of these things aren't as applicable now. It's somewhat close to the future town center, and also Zaharias, high-value open space property. And just to give you an idea of what that looks like roughly now, actually, this is about the size of it, if I'm not mistaken, although perhaps a little lower, actually. It is a little lower right now. And sorry, thank you. A lot lower. And obviously quite low. And this is what we'd like to keep from happening in the future. So the minimum 40 acre feet, the town's contribution of 20 acre feet to help sustain that. Mapping. There are residents that are near here, and it can be seen by large parts of, well, not large parts, but parts of Rock Creek, especially bordering 88th and the development there. It's really a beautiful site. You can see why the birds really like to go and be there. This is actually pretty close to the corner of Shamrock and 88th, where the proposed wildlife viewing area might be. And so this is the county fence. And although I haven't looked at this too much in depth, I think the rough line would be somewhere around in here where the town would be able to have access to put in a blind or some other viewing amenity. View. Lots of wildlife. These are American white pelicans. Lots of wildlife. Bald eagles like to come by, hang out on the ice. We don't need history anymore. Sorry, so that's all. But just wanted to very quickly just sort of go over some of the original reasons that OSAC had come up with for why we felt that this was important. And again, in the early parts of this process, it was sort of trying to figure out a way that we'd be able to have a solution to this problem. Because in the beginning, it it wasn't obvious how the funding with the county and with the town might be able to work together. Obviously, we've taken tremendous steps forward, and I think we're in an amazing position. I think this is a great opportunity. Thanks.
Great, thank you.
Can I ask John a question?
Trustee
John,
Hanson.
so in your opinion, $600,000 is well spent on behalf of the town of Superior?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay.
Okay, additional public comment?
I'm Bill McFadden, 1969 Piper Street, and I would just like to ask the council to accept and act on the unanimous recommendation of your working group. I think $600,000 is a small price to pay for a generational gem that will really attract people to the town of Superior and really beautify the entire town and make living here a lot better. The current size of the lake, reservoir, whatever you want to call it, does not support the wildlife that has been there in the past. This year, you don't see any pelicans out there this year, very few ducks. The egrets, all the other animals, or birds mostly, but you don't see very many of them out there this year. And I think keeping it at the non-jurisdictional level or the current level is, I don't think that's a good option. And once again, you don't want to end up with the dust bowl that we've had in previous years, which we will have if we bring it down to the non-jurisdictional level, probably on a fairly regular basis.
Very good, thank you so much.
Good evening, my name is Robert Momartz. I live at Saddlebrook. The town has open spaces because we like space, and we like the environment that it creates for the town. And we have a park for the very same reason on Rock Creek Parkway, to accomplish the same kind of purpose. And this is just another aspect of maintaining and improving the aesthetics of the community as a whole. The county gets a reservoir. The town gets a lake. It gets a wildlife preserve. And you have to look at the bigger picture, and that is what's good for the town as a whole in terms of how it markets itself, how it looks to the rest of the world, and how it makes the town feel. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Any additional public comment?
Lisa Rapp, 1975 Piper Street, and the comment was made of two things, basically. The comment was made, what does this do for the rest of the town of Superior? And I think Bob hit on that in a big way, in the sense that just because not everybody gets to view it directly, so many people do. And what all of us and all of those properties along 88th and in Saddlebrook benefit from really make our property values go up, other people attracted to our town, and that benefits us as a whole. So it's not just about those, large number of communities on 88th and in Saddlebrook that do benefit every day. And I am super fortunate to be one of those people that gets to look out onto that wildlife every day and have a real passion. And from the time I moved in and bought my place there 6 years ago, I have been flipping and making marks in my bird book and learning a whole new world of the difference between a mallard and all the other different tremendous variety of wildlife and water birds that are there. And I can speak to the devastation that draining caused last year. I mean, it truly was devastating to the wildlife there. And what we did get back as that small amount has brought a few things back, but it really, really is so sad, the impact. And so I do encourage you to consider what was said, that when you do have that water level and you keep it at that minimal, non-jurisdictional, I believe was the term, when you pull that water out for the agriculture, it's going to take us right back to that place again and again. And the more often we do that, my thinking is that impact we saw after 1 year of doing that, we won't recover from that. And that points back to generations and generations. So I'm in agreement. A small price to pay, which seems perhaps significant now, is really not significant in the long term. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Jim Payne, Superior. I'm chair of ProStack, and
also am a member of OSAC and was very proud to be a member of the working group. And I first want to briefly thank the county. They put in place and town manager Matt Magley put in place a process with the working group that I think is a model we should look at in other areas. It was a fantastically productive, very informative, very deliberative process. And I want to make it clear that I thought that was an excellent path, and we should do more of that in the future. Having said that, I do fully support the IGA, and I do think it's a very worthwhile investment for the town in the context of our priorities for open space, for buffers, for wildlife. I think it's very consistent with the other investments we've made throughout the town and on our own as a town and in conjunction with the county. And the county's been a good partner on these things, and I think this will be a great partnership for many, many years to come. So I urge you to support the IGA and the investment. Thank you.
Thank you.
Gladys, 404 South Avenue. I don't live anywhere near this lake. I grew up on a lake. I think you're taking an eyesore to the community and going to make it into a beautiful addition to the community. Yes, it's going to cost money, but you're getting off very, very, very cheap for $600,000, whatever that figure is. That can turn out to be an awesome amenity to the community. I would like to see, though, something more worked out so that there is more public access to, I don't care if even one corner, but my tax dollars is going to pay, and I just think that it needs to be a little bit more public access. Otherwise, I think it's a perfect scenario.
Thank you. Trustee Gerger, please.
If there are no more public comments, I'd like to make a motion, or?
Well, let's make sure that there isn't any more public comment.
I said if. That's why I said if. If there is.
So, if there's no more public comment, then any board discussion. It's like there's a little more public comment. Yes.
No more. Susan Bauer, 1770 Morrison Court. It's a 128-year-old reservoir, and in its time, there are now snails there. There are crawdads, there's frogs, there's turtles, or there was. We've created an environment that was part of our conscious or unconscious reason for moving to Superior. And here's why. In the process of talking to neighbors in Lakeview Estates, some of those people 20 years ago bought with the condition that they were going to have a front side or front row access to the lake. Whether or not you're responsible for those developer promises is another story, but they were given those assurances, and then Saddlebrook was built. In the marketing material for Saddlebrook, that reservoir was prominent in the marketing material. You may not have had anything to do with the marketing folks or the developers who developed that property and then sold it, or converted and sold it. But as residents, we have 4 egresses out of this town: Fulton, McCaslin, Rock Creek, and 88th. And most of the people who's hauling their kids over to Monarch are driving at least twice a day by that reservoir, and they're seeing the diversity of that wildlife and the quality. And we all enjoy how beautiful it is. I mean, to deny that would be foolish. Out of respect, Trustee Pennington, I appreciate you asking the question. Is $600,000 worth it? I appreciate the fact that you're watching the pocketbook. And yes, it is, for a variety of reasons, whether it's the future storage capacity that we need to be thinking about, whether it's about the aesthetics, whether it's about the borders, the buffers, whether it's about the future bikeways that are going to come by, whether it's about potential selling the Sahara's property after all these years. It might be a marketing aspect. It might even be a marketing aspect to lock this in as a reservoir in order for POSEC, I was confused, to secure this the Sahara's property as a open space property as well. there's reasons to be looking not only at the immediate term, but the long term and the value it brings. There's a lot of goodwill that went into us getting to this point tonight. And I have to say that last week at the POSAC meeting, I don't know if any of you are aware, but there was all kinds of goodwill capital expressed towards the town of Superior. Now, I don't know what the relationships are on all the other projects, but you got capital if you go forward. Okay, you don't go forward, or you want to, turn things up. I can't say what's going to happen to that. I'm not privileged to that. But I can say there was a lot of accolades. Actually, John can speak to that, because he was there. There was a lot of kudos and public comment made about that. And I would like to emphasize that. There are approximately 400 homes that look at the reservoir on any given day. Okay, between Saddlebrook and 88th and Lakeview. If I had to talk about numbers, let's talk about Purple Park. Let's just take the restrooms that were made at Purple Park. What did we pay to put permanent restrooms in Purple Park? Someone here knows. Yeah. 200,000?
No.
No.
40?
Something like
Yes.
that.
It's not that much money.
They're prefab. They're
Prefab is
prefabs.
about 40.
Okay, so to make it funny, how many deposits is it going to take till we get a return on investment on that? Sometimes a thing doesn't need to have a return on investment if it brings other values to the table, other benefits. I don't want to go into dollars and cents, but I'm happy to go down that path if we need to do that. But I don't want to be there tonight if we don't have to. So leave it at that.
Great, thank you very much. Any additional public comment? Seeing none, I believe. Any additional board questions and/or comments? Sure, we can do it that way. Well, I'm just going to say that I'm strongly in favor of this. It's hard to swallow an expenditure of $600,000, and if you look at the partial restoration, that you don't really get any benefit from that. The Dust Bowl scenario doesn't look very appealing to me either. And speaking of somebody who's spent a long time in this area before Rock Creek or any of these other developments were here, I think that we owe it to our animal community that we've devastated in a way through human development. I think it's an appropriate expenditure. Trustees, comments?
So I'd like to see the tweaks that we discussed. They're pretty minor, I think, but important. But I'm in favor of the concept. I like that when we look at the availability of open space and parks in different areas of town, I think for distribution purposes this is important. I think for the fact that it's a reservoir and that's distinct from the different kinds of things that we have in other parts of town, I'm in favor of it. I appreciate all the time that and effort that went into the citizens and panel recommendations, and I take those recommendations to heart. I like that it's sort of minimal O&M for the town going forward, which is not a bad thing, but I would like to see a nice viewing area that would make it accessible to more members of the community than the ones who just happen to be lucky enough to live there. I would like to explore looking at an outer ring that wouldn't disturb the shorebirds and so on later on, perhaps, but that's something that we can't do now, but we could potentially keep on the block for later. But I would be in favor of it.
Okay. Trustee Gregorus?
I would like to make a motion. Is it the time?
Sure, if you like. Yep.
All right. I would like to make a motion to approve the Town of Superior Resolution Number R-33, Series 2011. A resolution of the Board of the Trustees of the Town of Superior approving an amended and restated intergovernmental agreement between the Town of Superior and Boulder County for joint property management regarding the management of the Hudson-Harris Reservoir.
There's a motion. Is there a second? Trustees, comments, discussion?
Yeah, are we talking about the tweaks?
So I think
Would have
I guess
to be amended.
Yeah, so
Yeah,
my concern is that I
But it
don't want
wasn't
to
second,
craft
was
tonight.
it?
I think
Did we receive a second?
Yes.
Oh, okay.
So my concern is that, we have talked about having some changes to the IGA without having the water attorney look at it, and I think the county was interested in some of that language as well. So while I'm fully supportive of moving forward, I just want to make sure those details have been worked out. So for this motion, I think I'm probably going to vote against it, but I suspect we'll have something else come forward.
Well,
I don't think that's bad.
that's,
Yeah, I don't want to craft it on the fly.
Right.
that's
You want to withdraw
Very
your
against
motion?
There's a motion and a second. What I'm going to recommend, if people want to move forward and just want to have these issues addressed, I would just vote this down and we can have another motion.
Is there, you usually call
Tonight?
for discussion at this point. Can we have discussion?
Yes,
Okay.
we're in the discussion phase.
Okay.
You want to amend tonight?
If you want me to add, I believe your resolution says in substantially the form attached here too. If you're comfortable, you can authorize it and then have the attorney make, have the water attorney make the changes that you would wish to make.
That's
But-
fine. If
That's
everybody's-
what I would
Honestly,
vote for.
I personally don't think it's even needed because I think operationally, it's not going to make any difference if we don't have water. They're not going to have water, so it's kind of all moot. But I'm happy to make people comfortable with that. Trustee Pennington.
I like contracts to be as explicit as possible, so I can go one more meeting to have this all spelled out, have the county review it to make sure they're okay with it as well. I wanted to say this whole project, whole thing, just warms the cockles of my heart because it involved great process. I agree totally with Jim and everybody else who has complimented the process. Secondly, it brings together a community to solve a common problem, and I think this goes down in the annals of Boulder County and the town of Superior in having the residents say, we're not going to tolerate this, come forth, propose solutions, work with the county, work with the town, not as adversaries, but saying, how can we come together to solve this? And I think we've arrived at a great point. Having said that, I really would like to second Lisa's suggestion, my earlier suggestion, that as much as possible, without destroying habitats and all that our next focus after we approve this expenditure would be how can we then allow more of the community to participate in this? Because I don't want that to become an adversarial situation either. We've got a great asset. Let's make sure the entire community is happy with that asset. So if we can have a viewing space that perhaps is a little more substantial than that far corner with the whole thing all over here, if we can work on that to even maybe have a partial boardwalk that doesn't destroy anything, that allows a little more access, I'm fully in support of that. I personally would like to see us limit the outside risk of this project going over. But if that's not a concern of the rest of the board here, I just ask Ron, how sure are we of that $1.218 million estimate? Are we 90% sure that we're going to be able to accomplish it in there, or do we have any idea?
Ron Stewart, I don't think I could set a percentage on it. What I will tell you is that we're going to work very hard to bring this project in at that level. And as a staff, that's what we'll be working to do. Now, if we can't, then we'll have to have another discussion. But we're committed to the idea that we're going to do this as within that amount.
Trustee Gross?
Yeah, I'm very comfortable actually voting for this resolution tonight, and I would implore the other trustees to, obviously have to vote your conscience, but I think we can get it done tonight. I do not believe that the water attorney is going to come back with anything that will destroy this deal, frankly. I think this is the time to do it. There's been a lot of hard work, there's been a lot of collaboration. ProStac, OSAC, everybody has recommended this unanimously. I think tonight's the night, so I will be voting for it.
So I'll ask the attorney whether or not we need to have another motion for the substantially as attached to the acceptance of the town's attorney and our water attorney.
It's in the resolution, correct?
It's in the code.
I heard him say,
Is it?
I heard him say something like amendment in the title.
Okay, I didn't hear. I'm looking.
All right, I'm just
There's an amended and restated, that's how it
Yeah,
reads.
amended and restated, whatever
Yeah.
that meant.
Well, that
Yeah,
has
that's
to do
part of the
with-
resolution.
But
That has to do
that's
with our
it doesn't-
current.
That- yeah,
It
that's-
doesn't
that's
refer
not
to
what
future
that has
amendments.
Thank you. And we can't do friendly amendments, as I recall, so I think we have to kill one and then vote a new one.
I'm looking at the town attorneys.
Just 1 second, let me just look.
We can amend the motion.
I think so. I thought we had to vote on each motion when it's been seconded.
Just want to make sure that we cross the Ts and dot the Is.
It says it's substantially the same form as attached here too. It's subject to final approval by the town attorney,
Okay,
so we're
Right,
fine.
there you go.
Okay, very good. Okay, well then I'm happy with that too. Trustee Hanson.
Quick question. I like the idea, and I think that we can agree on this tonight and pass it, but my question is, when do we agree on where the funding is going to come from?
It's internal to us.
Or the funding for
That'll
that.
be during, when you adopt the final budget. I mean, all the work sessions we're having now and the public meetings we're going to have on the budget, and then once you adopt the final budget, that's when you make your final determination on how you're going to fund it.
Trustee Skometz.
And this funding doesn't include the deck, right? The
Yeah,
certificate does not include the deck, right?
So I would say that, we can talk about this during budget cycle, but this seems like a completely appropriate use of open space funds for protection of habitat, protection of wildlife, not just necessarily for home value. So at least from my perspective, this is a perfect use of that
Can we
fund.
include that in this resolution?
This is, we can, or we can just talk about it during budget cycle. All right, so motion and second. Any further discussion or questions?
Nice job, everybody.
Phyllis? I think we're spending some money.
Sorelli?
I think I was under the impression in our meeting in February on this, that we were going down this road, so, at this level, so I'm not surprised by this presentation tonight, and I also thought at least our head nod was in favor of it, so I've never changed my mind on that. I support this, and so I vote yes.
Okay.
Gregoris?
Definitely yes.
Hanson?
Absolutely, yes.
Buckle?
Well, can I I'll just say yes.
Pennington?
Yes.
Skubatsky?
Simply yes.
Williams?
Yes, I guess.
I moved here from the city of Chicago for open space, and I picked Superior because it had the most amount of open space, in my opinion. And I still feel that way, so I vote yes.
Chicago had a real lake.
So that's unanimous. Thank you very much. So I would like to thank everybody involved in this. I mean, I think it's been well stated before about what a good process, and I think process is always important. But honestly, at the end of the day, it's the crown jewel that we'll have, that our generations will be thankful that we did this. And I want to thank the county for, they could have easily said no, and we're just going to do what makes financial sense. I really appreciate the county's work on that. So,
Thank you.
anything else to come before the board? Seeing none, meeting adjourned. Thank you.
Thank you.